and I do have something about Patrick Hogstetter in here.
Welcome, guys! Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic 90s nerds, to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, and also horror fiction in general. So, today I'm joined by my lovely friend, Kat.
Hello!
Stephen King super fan.
Oh, I love Stephen King.
Yes. I also think of her as my personal Stephen King expert, my Stephen King consultant. So it's very nice to be able to talk to Kat about all things Stephen King, because if it's about King, Kat knows, I feel like.
I love it. I love it. And I love this book.
You love it, and you love it, including It the movie, It the book. So yes, guys, welcome. Today we are talking about It, the wonderful book by Stephen King, but we're also talking about the two different movie adaptations. Technically, it's like 2.5.
Do you realize it's like
3.5?
500 minutes
of
screen time.
Yes. Including the new ones and the old Pennywise Tim Curry one.
Yes.
So yes, guys, we will be talking spoilers for the 90s miniseries adaptation starring Tim Curry. We will also be talking spoilers for the two new movies with Bill Skarsgård, Part 1 or Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. So if you've not seen the movies, you might get some things spoiled, but again, if you've read the book, it's pretty much not going to spoil anything you don't already know, per se. Except there are some changes, especially in the newer It's, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to break it all down. But first, let's start off with some book stuff, Kat. This was your second time reading it. I do want to clarify, you read it years ago. It was my first time fully reading it, but it's technically my, second and a half or third and a half attempt at doing it, because I tried to read it when I was in high school, but I wasn't a big reader back then. So I didn't get through it, not because I didn't like it. It's just because I was not a big reader. And a book that long back then was extra intimidating. It's still intimidating now, a long book, but I can at least fathom finishing a long book.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you that you
Thank
were able
you.
to jump in and you met your goal to finish it once and for all. And I think you are excited that you did. So.
Oh, yes. Finally getting to read it. It feels like a huge accomplishment.
Well, I mean, some people say that it is Stephen King's magnus opus or whatever. Other people think it's Dark Tower. Some people even think it's The Stand. I can't really say comparing it to Dark Tower because I've only read The Gunslinger. But I think that it is just, it's one of his best. It's what I consider classic King. You know, if you want to go down that road of, you know, before and after his accident kind of thing. But
reading like his essentials, like books that are really considered prime King.
Right. Like if you're going to give somebody a top 10 list of books that they should read to cut their teeth on King, because he's got a huge catalog, I would say it would be one of the books that you would put in that top 10.
Yes, yes. I would have to agree. And like, you know, when we started this project of reading a King book per month of every month this year, my whole goal was like, how is my top King reads going to change as I read more and more? And I will say, I think it will fall in the top 10. However, I will say I didn't rate it a perfect score. I rated it a 4.5 out of 5, and I'm going to round it up for Goodreads because it was close to perfect. But at one point, I was like, oh man, this is like kind of a chug to get through. But it was still enjoyable. But at the same time, it was like, but I liked it better. So like Misery, after we talked about it, I was like, is Misery one of my top ones or not? And then I was like, I still don't know how I feel even looking back now, but I think it surpasses Misery. It surpasses easily Gerald's Game that we've read earlier this year. Of course, The Langoliers. I mean, it's not like, you know, classic King or anything, but it's fun King.
But it's arm wrestling Pet Sematary.
It's arm wrestling Pet Sematary. For me, Pet Sematary, I think, is like a little bit more of a favorite for me personally than this. But the storytelling in this, regardless of what is a favorite or not, you can't deny the genius and the effort it took to craft this type of story with such a huge scope. I mean, imagine just all the planning, and he had to dive into the history of Derry.
Well, and I think that's the big thing, is that it is what really puts Derry, Maine on the map, like, and fleshes the town out. And then you see that town in other stories that he's written. You know, I mean, we hear about Derry in Misery. We hear about it in Gerald's Game. We get a sign, at least in the movie, you know, they pass Derry in Pet Sematary.
Yep. In the new Pet Sematary.
We're also going to be visiting Derry again in Needful Things. So, and if you've read any of his other books, Derry is, you know, a town that comes up again, especially like Insomnia. You know, it takes place in Derry. So, to me, it's important in the aspect that it puts a location, you know, of a place that Stephen King, you know, has these odd, weird things happen. I mean, Derry's really not a nice place to live.
No. I mean, that's putting it lightly.
I mean, Mike even says the murder rate is 6 times higher than any other town of comparable size in New England. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but Derry is actually based on Bangor. You know, so it's pretty neat that it is a fictional town based on a real town, and a lot of the things that he talks about are in that real town. In fact, just recently, on one of the groups I follow, it's called the Losers Club group on Facebook. A couple went and visited some of the landmarks, and that Paul Bunyan statue really exists.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
I was so close.
I was
so close to Bangor when I went to Maine. I went to Maine earlier this year. We were like 5 hours away, and it was just a little too far for us to travel because we didn't have enough time built in Maine. But I was right there.
I think we need to go take a field trip to Bangor, Maine, just to go see. But anyway, it was pretty cool. This couple went to several different spots. they went and visited the, sewer where Georgie, gets his arm ripped off, and, but they had the standpipe there, the Barrens, a place that would have been similar to the Barrens. And then that Paul Bunyan statue. I was like, oh man.
I actually didn't know. I knew about some of the other things,
existed.
But not the Paul Bunyan. I do want to say a quick hello to everyone who's joining us live. We've got Katrina. Katrina, hi. Check out her channel, by the way. We've got Halco, thank you for joining. Cool Gamers here again. Arlene, hi Arlene, how you doing? Greetings from Manchester. We appreciate you tuning in from so far away. Jamie's here, good to see you too. Crystal's here. Check out her channel. Fiber Artsy is the name of the channel. She is marvelous. She reads a lot of King too, by the way, for any of you fellow King fans. Jamie says she really liked the audiobook for it. I also listened to the audio, but I also read along physically and marked. Like you could see I marked quite a bit. So obviously, I gave it a 4.5. I clearly liked it.
Right.
I mean, there's not a lot I could criticize except for sometimes I was like, it could have been a little shorter. Other people are like, no, it's perfect. It didn't need to be shorter. And I could see both sides of that coin personally. Bob Apples is here. He says, it was a slog for me, albeit I was satisfied with the journey.
Oh, yay.
So I did enjoy the audio. However, I did find that the audiobook narrator did scream sometimes. And so I was like,
Wasn't it Steve Weber?
Yes. I think so. Yes, I believe so. Now, for some reason, I can't remember, even though I spent like flipping 30 hours with this guy.
I think you said that it was him, which is kind of funny because he plays Jack Torrance.
Yes, that is him.
And TV series for The Shining, which we'll watch.
We will watch that in December because we're going to read The Shining. It's a reread for both of us, and we're going to watch all the stuff related to The Shining. It'll be great. But like that to me is above it. But we'll see how I feel upon reread. It's been 10 years, but it is high up there. Like, it is just a masterful piece of writing.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think it's kind of literary for myself, like sort of the same way that Pet Sematary. Like there are themes and there's, just the literary figurative language and imagery and all of that stuff that us English teachers like, if you're delving into a book. So I think you can break it down. Like there's more to it. Just like Pet Sematary was really about grief. This is more about like victory over, evil.
I also think it's about the loss of childhood, the loss of innocence, growing up. I think that's really, the whole story is a metaphor for growing up.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a coming-of-age horror story, but at the core, it's really a coming-of-age story.
Friendship, loyalty, all of that mixed up in there, But anyway, I loved it. I mean, it is a long book. Kelsi and I were talking about it earlier before we came on. The Stand is considered the longest book that he's written.
But I think some editions are the exact same length of it and The Stand.
Is only 15 pages shorter.
So it's really almost the exact same.
So it's almost the same thing. And guys, I read somewhere that it was like supposed to be like 4 pounds. So I weighed my chunker of a book. I weighed my hard copy, and it is exactly 4 pounds. I'm not lying.
I love that you
on the
it.
scale this morning.
Put it on the scale this morning
just to see because I was curious. But I love it, and I love the fact that it is based on, inspired, not based, but inspired by that Norwegian fairy tale, The Three Billy Goats Grumps.
Yes.
So instead of, the children having to, fight a troll under a bridge, they're fighting a demonic entity
underneath this town.
That looks like a clown in the sewer, which is disgusting.
Yes. I
think I'd rather be under a bridge.
I know. Yes. I don't want to be in the sewer, but I think it was really fascinating actually getting through the whole book this time. What I wanted from the book was getting those elements that were never represented in any of the movie adaptations. So the part with the turtle, which I had just gotten the faint introduction to when I first attempted the read in high school. They mentioned the turtle early on, not like it's mentioned in the end, but like, oh, he looks at the thing in the basement and there's a turtle on the wax or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, and I've heard for years that the turtle is prominent. I was like, what the hell is the turtle? I didn't know. Now I know because I read it. So I kind of like those elements. Some people might not like, it almost kind of goes into a sci-fi realm, but I liked the whole turtle thing. And
well, I do too, because it is also, that's that macro verse, with the Dark Tower and the multi-dimensions, and it's all that connection, of how it all started. And there's theories that he's really the Crimson King that is in the Dark Tower. The Deadlights is something from that. So I like all the fact that there was something that was created by this turtle, and then you've got the good and evil thing going on in that dimension, but then it also affects people here.
But let me ask you this. There's a third thing that they slightly reference at the end. The turtle is dead at the end.
Right.
But, by the way, guys, there are spoilers in this chat, so I just spoiled something, so maybe I should put up the banner. And also, as I'm putting up this banner, guys, please shout out your feelings of the book, your ratings. What did you like? What did you think could be better? If you thought there were some criticisms. I'm putting up the thing now. Sorry for this, guys. I just don't want anyone to come late and not know that there's book and movie spoilers. So yes, there's something referenced to another entity that is probably good. And at the very end of the book, I don't know if you recall, something says, "Good job, boy," or something to Bill. Do you have any inkling of what that other being is helping them, guiding them after the turtle is dead to defeat Pennywise? I have no idea.
I don't remember if it's ever anything that's mentioned.
It's not mentioned by name, but they hint that there's something else.
If it's mentioned somewhere else, either I don't remember or I haven't come across it yet.
Do you guys have any theories?
Especially if it's in the Dark Tower series.
Yeah, which it could be, for all I know. Do you guys have any theories about this other entity that's not the turtle, but that is on the side of good and is rooting for the kids as adults? Also, a thing that I love that's not done in the movies is that the town gets destroyed. That's
yes,
so cool.
Yes,
I love that. I loved that. Also, a little tidbit that you might not have noticed. Okay, so I didn't realize that the last words, or some of the last words, it might not be the very last words, but let me see. I'm going to make sure here. Of course, this is... sorry. It's somewhere. It's about stay true, stand. That's the last words. Okay, so in the new CBS adaptation of The Stand, the TV miniseries of The Stand, they changed the ending of The Stand, and this is really crazy. So the ending of The Stand now, and this is not really a spoiler, the last lines are "Be true, stand," which is the exact lines that are spoken in this book. So that must be like on purpose, but it's also a great way to end The Stand because, the name The Stand. So I thought that was kind of crazy, and it had to be somewhat on purpose because they did pass the new ending by Stephen King before they did it for the CBS adaptation. So I was like, how crazy that the CBS version of The Stand ends with like the last words in the book, It. And it's actually said in voiceover in the Chapter 2 It movie. Oh. They say, "Be true, stand."
Yeah.
Or "Don't be afraid, stand," or something like that. But essentially almost the same exact words is how they end the Stand new CBS miniseries.
Yeah, which I haven't seen that one yet, so
it's not really spoiling what happens. It's just a line they say. But because in the book, The Stand, it ends with like them having a conversation, and one of them's just like, "I don't know." It's kind of like left up in the air what they think about. I can't remember the specifics around the conversation, but the ending of the TV series, by having them say "Be true, stand," it's a more firm ending, a more like positive ending. I just thought it was great how it mirrored It. And it's his 2 longest books. So isn't that crazy? Anyway,
I just think that there's a lot of things that he refers to because it all is connected somehow, whether it's like something very subtle or something like in your face kind of thing.
Yeah.
Getting back to Derry, I kind of feel like also Derry is, even though it's the setting and it's where it takes place, also kind of feel like it's a character. It's like it's got a life of its own. And I think it's because it's steeped in the history. It didn't start off very great because of when this entity came.
Yes.
It seems like a lot of things happened, terrible things. And it doesn't always seem like it started off with kids being the ones that were affected by it.
No,
that was one of the questions.
Bad accidents. It influenced racism. It influenced, bigotry against
bullying, abuse, just crimes, just bad things.
Yeah.
Murder.
Which has nothing to do with kids in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
It just was an influence for evil.
So I almost, that was like one of the questions I asked myself reading it this time is, why were kids targeted at this point? you know, like why weren't they using adults? Like it seemed like adults were kind of like put to sleep, kind of sleepwalking when these things, bad things were happening to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the kids basically had to be the ones that had to, you know, kill it. Because if you remember that one scene where Beverly's trying to get away from Henry Bowers and the gang, and that neighbor sees what's happening but just kind of picks his newspaper up and walks inside or whatever. It's sort of like they're sleepwalking through these instances that are happening. But the same thing happened with the bar scene when the guy goes in to kill everybody during the lumberjack, you know, the lumberjack guy. And people were at the bar and they're kind of still drinking and stuff. And he's going around hacking people up.
Oh, yeah.
Just like, cheers. As somebody's like getting chop, chop, chop back there.
Well, I do think that part of the reason why he prefers kids, or the entity prefers kids, the entity that is behind it, is because it tastes better. Like the fear must be intensified in children. And there's a little hint of that on page 6 on my copy here. It says, smells of dirt and wet and long gone vegetables would merge into one unmistakable indelible smell, the smell of the monster. It was the smell of something for which he had no name, the smell of it, crouched and lurking and ready to spring, a creature which would eat anything, but was especially hungry for boy meat. So to me, I think it loves fear and hate and the negative feelings
but then
of
once
humans.
it got a taste of a child,
but I think it especially prefers children's fears. So when it can get it wants the child.
Yeah, because if you all this, well, because I mean, they did have the one cycle where it was at the Easter egg hunt, and that had to do with the kids.
Tons of kids being killed, and you could feast on whoever. There's lots of souls, or what have you. So I think there's a number of ways you can interpret that, but it's very fascinating to think about, you know, what all that means. It's like preying on childhood innocence and fears and
and I even talked about fears, but before I get to that part, I think we should introduce our characters for anybody who, I can't imagine anybody being here if they haven't read the book.
No, I think everyone's pretty familiar.
But I mean, we have Bill Denbrough, who's, you know, his brother's the one that gets his arm eaten off and killed by Pennywise at the beginning. Beverly Marsh, Mike Hanlon, Ben Hanscombe, Richie Tozier, I guess I'm pronouncing that correctly, Eddie Kasprak, and then Stanley Uris. All of them are considered losers. They make up the Losers Club because they have something issue that makes them kind of an outcast,
right?
You know, among their peers at school. And when I was thinking about the fears that are in this book are different for each one of these kids, but I put them in 3 categories. I put that fear consumes, it causes people to react, or it causes them to surrender. And a perfect example of the consumption, letting fear consume them, was Stanley, in my opinion, because he just could not handle the fear, that he let the fear consume him enough that he killed himself to get away, to stop the fear. You know, reaction was Henry Bowers, because his fear of his father was so great. Instead of it letting him consume him, he reacted in the fact of murdering his father.
Yes.
Okay. And then the surrender was Beverly, because she ended up surrendering to the fear of it by marrying someone who was just like who she feared all her, you know, life. Now, I think we could put the other children,
Eddie, a little bit too, since he married someone who's so much like his mother.
Yes. So what I'm saying is we could take all of the characters, all of the losers,
and put them in a category.
Put them in the category. But that's kind of how I was thinking about it, you know, is that the way fear perpetuates for people in general. Like, we both have fears, but our fears could be totally different, you know, and it's not always like a fear of a cockroach, which I have a fear of that, but it could be a fear of failure, or the fear of disappointing somebody, or just the fear of, you know, having somebody, you know, whack you because you say the wrong thing.
Right.
So that was something that I noticed, that it takes a different form for everybody. And that's why I guess it perpetuated to where we could visually see those fears, you know, with the werewolves and the leper.
Yeah, and it
all
looked
that kind of
different
stuff.
for all
and
the
it
kids.
Looked different for all
and I
of
love
them.
that. I love that. And I thought they did that, or King specifically did that so well in the novel. And I think they tried to do it really well in the old 90s miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
They also did it in the new versions with Bill Skarsgård. However, I personally don't think it was as successful. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But I'm not as happy with, after rewatching the new versions, I'm like totally going to destroy them a little bit. Sorry. That's like a spoiler, but like, 'cause you were just saying that they were pretty good. Like, it was pretty good. And I was like, after reading the book, I was like,
after reading the book, it does, you know, it's very hard sometimes. Like if you see a movie before you read the book, because the book has so much that's left out of a movie. They can only do so much with it.
I do agree with Halko here. I kind of wish I did this too. Halko says, I wish I had read the book before I saw the movie. I think I would have liked it more. I don't really enjoy a read when I know what's going to happen. I still enjoy this, but I think it would have been a completely different experience. It might have wound up being more of my favorite had I never seen the movie, but I grew up watching the Tim Curry made-for-TV movie, like, tons of times. I've probably seen it over 30, 40 times. So we're talking about, like, a story I know very well. It's one of my favorite horror adaptations ever before I read the book. So, like, I have a very special place for that one. So it does kind of color your experience a little bit while reading.
Yes.
But again, the book was really great. It was better than I thought it would be because it has always intimidated me after I tried to read it and failed back in high school. And it was kind of like a looming cloud. But I knew I could read it.
A looming cloud.
Yes. I knew I could read a long book, though, after reading The Stand. I was like, if I could read The Stand, I could read it.
Kelsi's fear is a looming cloud.
A looming cloud, yes.
Of it.
Yeah. But I have conquered it.
You did.
So I don't have a looming fear anymore of it. But yes.
Yeah, I loved the character development. I think he did a great job. I think, I was invested in my characters. I mean, you and I sent you a text yesterday saying, or the day before.
Who's your favorite loser?
Who's your favorite loser?
Tell them who yours is.
Well, my favorite loser is Eddie. And he remained my favorite from the book in both adaptations.
I don't like him as an adult in the miniseries adaptation, and I really do like him in the new adaptation.
Yeah, he's my least favorite in that, but as far as just overall, like even as a kid, I loved him as a kid.
I like him more in the book.
In the movies, and then I loved him in the book. But Eddie, to me, his whole backstory, the fact that he's got this mother who's just crazy, which to me, the whole mother thing is hilarious because she does not remain consistent in any, like her book version is totally different than her 1990 version.
Oh yeah.
Totally different from her 2017 version.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wild to me that she varied so much. Like, when you compare it to like Beverly's dad changes somewhat, like as far as like where he was a janitor and like whether he was an alcoholic or not and his level of abuse, but he remained the same.
Pretty much abusive.
You know what I'm saying? Still a scary person, a person that I wouldn't want to have as a father. You know what I'm saying? But Eddie's mom,
especially in the 1990 version, which he's not even married in the 1990 version as an adult. He's living with his mother, and she's slim,
and she's so prim and proper,
and she's very skinny.
But don't you think she's just so prim and proper? Like, I hold my tea, my pinky up.
Very different from what I, imagined her like in the book.
Exactly, but I don't know. I mean, he is my favorite, like across the board. It doesn't mean that I dislike the other characters. I love all the other characters for different reasons at different times, but consistently he is my one, and unfortunately he's my one that
I know. So my favorite loser is Ben, just because he's so lovable, and I don't know, he's pining. You're wanting him to get Bev, and I had no idea because I'd only seen the movies that frickin' Bev sleeps with Bill, like as an adult. He's just like, haha, I'm going to cheat on my wife. Like, what is with you, King? King's always
it was a love triangle this whole entire time. Ben loves Bev. Bev loves Bill, kind of thing.
But, like, Bill also is supposed to love his wife, Audra.
Yeah, that's true.
And she's not even involved in the new movie. His wife,
None.
really.
And she was really mean.
She was.
I was like, I'm glad she didn't come back, because if she came, the deadlight should have sucked her up, and she
I don't know why
lived.
they changed her so much for, like, that was weird.
Yeah, it was very light. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at the people, the way the adults in the newer version, they're different. They're almost like magnified 100 times more than how they were in the book or the 1990 version. Like, Eddie's mom is like really over the top, seductive. Like, I was like ready for her to like try to, get it on with one of the kids. Like, I mean, I was just like, you're so gross. You're weird.
There's
something
weird.
The way she was like eyeing the kids when they were leaving or whatever. And then Beverly's dad is the scariest.
Yeah.
I think in that situation. And Audra is not pleasant at all.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's like magnified a little more edgy, or a little more not as likable, I guess, in that sense. But anyway, I know we're jumping the gun on that. But
in terms of losers, like Richie, because of the book, I actually didn't like Richie too much from the movies, either movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually liked him a little bit more in the book, especially when he's an adult in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to help Bill, like, when Bill gets lost into the like psyche where he's battling with what really it is,
right,
in like the cosmos or like whatever, and then Richie does it too,
mm-hmm.
and he's like almost saving Bill. So like I was like, I really like Richie there, but I hated Richie's dialogue, like where he's, I don't know, where he's like making all these jokes in the book. I didn't like that either, but that's along the same lines as, I just find him obnoxious.
But I also wonder if that is his fear. His joking and his voices and all that was the manifesting of a fear of him being himself. And so he had to be something else all the time, or be on.
No, yes, I agree with that, but I just didn't like the way it was read.
It comes off obnoxious.
Yes.
Like, instead of you doing something to make people like you, you're actually repelling people.
But he didn't repel the losers.
But the thing is he was really a good friend. He came through so many different times for them.
No, he's definitely a good friend. I'm just saying, like, the dialogue annoyed
I agree.
me.
That's what I'm saying, but I think it's part of...
And the way they read it on the audiobook, I was like...
part of the persona of him having to overcompensate, or be that class
clown, I do agree,
or whatever, because of whatever insecurities or fears he had.
But I really liked him as an adult, though, in the book, which surprised me, because like I didn't really care for him as an adult in the 1990 movie, especially. I always was like, he's pretty corny, like cheeseball. I didn't really like the adult casting. Even Ritter, I thought was kind of corny. I love the kid casting for
right. Well, and I do think that's a criticism. That is a criticism, is that the kids pretty much outshine the adults.
Well, I think in both versions, in both adaptations, Chapter 1, the newer version, and I think the miniseries. But actually, it's almost like the miniseries people knew that part 1 was the stronger part, and that the kids were so compelling. Because I just watched the documentary, guys. It's out now. Thank you to Mr. Morningstar for telling me that it was finally out. I have been looking for it, the story of Pennywise, the documentary. It is out now. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get it through Shadowbox, through Amazon Prime. You can get a 7-day free trial. Sign up for it, watch it, and cancel. That's what I'm going to do. I just signed up for it, so I watched it for free. Technically, it's a paid subscription on Amazon Prime. It's through, like, again, Shadowbox. Watch the documentary. I've got some tidbits I'll share later when we talk about the miniseries. I know I'm jumping the gun, but it's hard not to go between the movies and the book.
I know it's hard.
But there was so much good stuff, but they were basically admitting, like, we know that the kid part is pretty strong. And for the adults, they wanted to use network people. So people that was already a part of their shows on their network. So they couldn't just go out and get any actor. They were lucky they even got Tim Curry, because he wasn't really on the list of network approved actors that they were considering originally for Pennywise. But then they started thinking Rocky Horror, and they were like, we got to get Tim Curry. And they asked him, he didn't even have to audition. He was like, I'll do it. Yeah. So anyway, there's more tidbits about that to come. But my point is that the adults that they cast, the reason they might be weaker is because they had to use network people.
Right.
Because that's what
a lot of them didn't audition for it.
Yeah, they were just on the network. Yeah. And so to me, that's why it doesn't always fit, in my opinion, their portrayal of what I thought it was going to.
And also, too, really, the adults in the newer version, too, I think the kids outshine them as well.
I do, too.
I think the performances. But I also wonder if that just speaks to the source material. The kids were the strongest when they were the children.
Right.
When they were together all the time in the situation. whether they were battling, even at the aftermath of it. And then once they split off and went their ways, I mean, that's 27 years in between the time that they came together and they were so close with one another to where they are now. It is going to feel stilted. It's going to feel weird. Even though you cared about these people and you liked them and all that kind of stuff, you didn't stay in touch with them. Now, we do know that part of it was a memory thing, but it's the fact that they're just not in the same place. And so they're not going to act the same way that they did when they were kids.
Right.
But let's check out some people who have favorites, because a bunch of people were saying who their favorites were.
I know
in the comments.
My friend Crystal says, I think Bill is my favorite loser, but I also like Ben. Team Ben. But yeah, Bill is good too. I just think Bill's just a natural leader.
Yes.
So that's why I didn't gravitate towards him, because, you know, everyone liked Bill already. Jamie says, my favorite loser is Richie. I was kind of obnoxious like that when I was a kid, she says.
Wow.
I will say, I like this comment here by Jamie. Hold on, where is it? I just saw it. I've heard a theory where the losers might have a little bit of the shine, which I could buy into, because
I could buy into that.
Not every kid saw what was going on.
Right.
Saw what really was going on that they were seeing. So maybe they did have a little bit of the shine. That's a cool theory.
Well, we also know that Beverly kind of has a little bit of the shine because she was in the Deadlights. So you just wonder, you know.
I mean, I think they did a great job at casting the kids, because it's hard for a kid to act some of these big emotions in the book.
Oh, I think
Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's a lot of really deep emotions and psychological things that they have to portray that's in this book. A lot of it is in here.
Yes.
And it speaks to both sets of kids how great their performances were, I think.
Okay, so I just want to say a couple of other things.
Go ahead.
We can move on to the movies if you want to do that.
No, we can talk more about the book too.
Basically, you know me, I like to see where there's cross references and stuff like that. But, you know, I just felt like this book was just rich with a lot of symbolism.
Yes.
The silver, which was the bike, the name of the bike, which was also what they used in the slingshot. I liked how that was, you know, an underlined symbol throughout.
That is
a
sewer
great system
observation.
As a whole was a symbol throughout. I mean, crap goes there, and that's basically what is happening.
Derry is waiting in crap, both like literally and like metaphorically.
Exactly. The sewer system is hiding all the crap, the literal crap that goes into the sewer system. But Derry also, you know, that sewer system is hiding the racism, the abuse, you know, everything that they're dealing with there. I loved the poem that is throughout Ben's poem. I thought that was beautiful.
Yes, I think it's perfect.
Also, the imagery of the clown was wonderful, because I personally can't stand clowns. I think they are scary, and I think that was good that Stephen King chose a clown, because he says most kids are afraid of them.
I think he contributed to how scared people are of clowns now with this book, and then of course the popularity of Pennywise from the original miniseries. I think people now are more apt to be scared of clowns because of this story.
Now, there is a rumor that he based his Pennywise on the serial killer, the Gacy guy, but that is not true. He basically based it on a compilation, a blending of Ronald McDonald.
Yeah.
Bozo the Clown, and then some clown from Howdy Doody, which I didn't know. But
Gacy, I thought they discovered a picture of Pennywise that he painted, so I thought it was around before Gacy. Maybe I'm wrong though.
I'm just saying from things that I've read, a lot of people think that that's what, you know, but that's not true. Stephen King has confirmed that his idea of the clown was more like a Bozo the Clown or a Ronald McDonald kind of thing.
Right.
Which I always thought Ronald McDonald was kind of creepy.
Yeah.
You know, for kids, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's because of creepy clown stuff that has come out that makes me think that. But I don't know. But I also think that there was irony throughout the whole entire book. Lots of irony, whether it was dramatic or situational. And the biggest being that the Losers Club, the losers in the Losers Club become the most successful adults out there even Mike, who doesn't leave, still is successful, because if he wouldn't have stayed, they wouldn't have had all the information, the historical information and things they needed to have when they came back to defeat Pennywise the second time.
Very good points there. I love all of your observations.
Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to say is that there are references in the book. I'm not sure if you realize this or not, but Dick Halloran from The Shining.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, with the cook, right?
Yes, yeah. He is on pages 458 and 59 of the book. He's the young soldier that actually saves Mike's dad at the Black Spot.
Yes,
when they have the fire.
That was so cool.
And so that I think was awesome. He's from The Shining. On page 502, which you haven't read The Dead Zone yet, but Frank Dodd is a serial murderer in The Dead Zone, and he's referenced on page 502. Beverly talks about, the guy in there that, kills people. And then Christine is actually referenced on page 951.
I don't think I caught that.
That is the car that picks Henry up.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And brings him. Belch is the one that's driving, but it is the 1958 Plymouth Fury.
Wow.
So isn't that cool?
That is cool.
So I'm not sure if y'all know of any other references that are in, the book from other, books, but those are it. And then anybody out there that's read 11/22/63, I just think this is wonderful because I've read the book. Jake Epping actually has a conversation with Beverly and Richie about a month after they defeat it.
That's really cool.
The first time they're out by close to the Barrens having a picnic and they're dancing, and he goes out there and kind of talks to them and shows them a couple of things, and they kind of tell him what's been happening in Derry at that time.
That's pretty crazy. It makes you kind of want to read it.
It's just wonderful to me because it really is a sweet little moment.
Yeah.
With them, especially since if you've read it and at what point in time in history they're at, they're in a point where Derry's better than it had been. Right. Kind of thing. But those are just some tidbits that I've had about the book. And I can save the thing about Adrian Mellon for when we talk about the movie, or I could do it now.
You can do it now if you want.
Okay. Adrian Mellon, that murder was actually, that was true. That happened at the time in Bangor. It was a guy named Charles Howard. He was 23 years old.
And that's one of the atrocities that Mike describes having happened in the town.
Well, it's the scene where the gay couple is on the bridge, and when he's thrown into the water, and then we see Pennywise on the shore or whatever. That crime was a hate crime that happened back in 1984 in Bangor. And the young man who lost his life was Charles Howard, and it pretty much played out the same way, except that he could not swim. And that's what ended up happening, was he ended up drowning,
right?
Because he couldn't swim. But I just thought that was, like a true thing that he brings into it. It was almost kind of like a nod to him, like a tribute.
Right, like that shouldn't have happened. Like, look how horrendous this was.
And apparently there are other forms of pop culture that have kind of used that incident in their art, basically kind of like a tribute to that.
Oh wow, yeah, because
a mention of it because of that, because it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
I mean, really awful. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, the tie for that. But yeah. So
some great observations. I wish I had all those like sophisticated observations, but I do not. For the movie, I have plenty of tidbits, like for the 1990 movie, because I just watched that documentary, and because I've seen it like a billion times, as I said. But I do want to highlight a few comments before we move on to some movie stuff. Bob Apple says, "I think Ben is my favorite too." Ben. Yeah. More Ben power. So Smells Like Teen Horror says, look up some of the old black and white Ronald McDonald commercials. One of them is really similar to Georgie meeting Pennywise. We got to look that up. Yeah. That's cool. Thanks for letting us know. Also, my friend Crystal, she did say that 11, I told you that one of my friends said that it was too long. It was Crystal who just read 11/22/63, and she didn't think it was like, she likes long books. She likes long King books, but this one she said was a little bit too long when I read her analysis of it. But she said she loved the scene with Beverly.
Yeah, it really is sweet. It really is sweet.
Kind of makes me want to read it just to see that scene.
I mean,
but
even if you just read the pages, I have them written down.
I can't remember. I watched the adaptation on TV, the TV adaptation. I don't remember if that's even in it. It might be, but maybe
I don't
not.
remember it. I mean, recently I've seen the adaptation, and I don't remember that.
I don't think they kept that in there. I mean, they probably couldn't figure out a way to keep it in, in the work.
Right.
So anyway, let's move on to the adaptation, since we just loosely mentioned an adaptation anyway. I'm really excited. Do you want to dig into the new ones, the old one?
I mean, we could start with the old one if you want to.
Well, it is chronological, so I guess we can just jump into that. So, of course, Kat has all her nice info with the director, the actors, the ratings. I didn't do any research. I'm lazy as hell, apparently. What did you guys think of the movie? Do you like any of the adaptations? Did you like any of the adaptations better than the movie? Do you like one adaptation over the other? Please shout out all your opinions below. We will read your opinions because I am curious. Because my opinion of the new 2017 and 2019 versions have completely changed after reading the book. But also,
I had a feeling they probably would.
I thought it was more cartoony after watching it a second time. Not that the 1990 version is perfect. It is corny in some ways, but it also is simple. And I feel like the 1990 version, before you get into your facts, I feel like overall it does pay as much tribute and sticks as close as it can to the story with being as short as it is. It really tried. And the director, part of what I learned from this the story of Pennywise documentary, they were saying they were disappointed with having to have a big spider at the end. The big criticism of the 1990 movie is the end. Everyone always says the kids, that part is great, but chapter 2, especially at the end with the ridiculous spider, the spider looks so much more badass than how they shot it. So the animatronic spider could actually move so much more. They even said, like, the director even admitted, like, we were shooting that scene the last 2 days. We had a little bit of time. We had all these big dreams and like a shoestring budget for this, but they were just trying to do it really quickly. Yeah. So the puppeteer, there's like a guy in the spider. He's like laying lengthwise in this. You've got to watch this documentary. The documentary blew my mind. I'm like, this is the shit I love, is documentaries with freaking behind the scenes stuff. So the It Made for TV movie documentary, the story of Pennywise, it's gold. But anyway, the dude's in the spider. He can move the eyes. He can move the pincers. He can move the friggin'. But in the freaking movie itself, all you see is like it being like,
which is so crazy.
Just like some pincers move. Its eyes don't even move, but it could move. They were just trying to go. The puppeteer even said, like, I can make it move more. They're like, no, we're done. Go to the next shot.
Yeah, and that's the bad thing about when your art has to be sacrificed because of the almighty dollar. And you know what I'm saying? I mean, when you think about just anything in general, it's like art truly suffers when it comes to like the bottom line.
It does.
Of money.
But I do think that the made-for-TV movie did all it could to be as faithful as it could.
Their budget was only like $12 million.
Yeah, and like and with the restrictions of the network and of the standards practices, I can't believe they did what they did with that, because they were even pushing it because they got denied the final cut. The cut we know now got denied like 4 times, and they had to have a special screening with the director who had to convince the people to allow it to be aired as it was. So that was even a whole conversation that had to be had after they were already denied. So even though people might think that it's tame compared to the new version, they fought for what was released. Right. And I will say the director admitted that part 2, the spider thing could have been better, but the way Stephen King wrote the ending with the turtle and then the mind battle, that was almost unfilmable in his opinion. And clearly it's not only his opinion, because the new version didn't really tackle the mind stuff, the psychological battle, in another dimension. They didn't tackle that.
And I think that's one of the biggest things about trying to turn Stephen King's written words, text or whatever, into something visual, because a lot of what happens in his books happens in the mind. And it's hard to convey that in film. So a lot of times these filmmakers and directors take liberties with what they think is going to translate better on the big screen. And so for readers, a lot of times that's the disappointment. That's why people always say the book is better than the movie. So you almost have to treat them as separate entities, because Otherwise, you'll go crazy. You'll never want to watch anything that's made from a book.
Do you want to hear something that will blow your mind about the movie, the made-for-TV movie?
What?
So originally, the concept was to have an 8 or 10 hour miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
The goal was 8 to 10 hours. And George Romero was interested in directing
I have that
yes,
written
oh, you
down.
did? Yes. Yes, so, and he wanted to do it as an 8 to 10 hour, and he knew that it couldn't be overly gory. He knew about the restrictions of TV, but he was still intrigued because he loved the book. However, once the network started to get scared, they're like, we're kind of getting nervous here. Like, we're going to have to whittle it down to 3 hours. 3 hours. So George is like, I'm out. So
well, also too, I mean, the information I found was he also had to drop out because he was remaking Night of the Living Dead.
That could have been part of it too, but I think he wasn't interested in condensing it that much.
But do you realize how close George Romero has come to adapting Stephen King's work? It seems like always something is happening and getting in the way. Poor George.
I know, he's lost out so many times.
Okay, so diving into the 1990, of course, we know it is a 2-part miniseries that was made for television. It aired in 1990. The director was Tommy Lee Wallace. Fun fact, he was a longtime collaborator with John Carpenter, and he directed Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, and Fright Night 2, but he also was an editor, or one of the editors, with Charles Bornstein, on the original Halloween and The Fog, which I think are great movies.
I love those both of those movies, of course.
I mean, of course, John Carpenter. How can you?
I mean, yeah, come on. Yeah, come on.
IMDb gave it a 6.8 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes 68%, and Google users 84%, which I think are fabulous, especially for a made-for-television movie and for the time period that was in.
And the budget and so many things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many restrictions. It came out great in my opinion.
I think so. I mean, I loved it. I actually bought it. I have it on DVD.
I have it on DVD
you know,
as well,
and loved seeing it, you know, again, revisiting it, because I actually watched it live when it was on the television set back in the day. Commercials and everything.
I can't remember if I watched it live, but I do know that it's one of the first like horror movies that I ever saw, because you didn't have to rent it. It was on TV, and it was one of the first things that scared the living daylights out of me.
I know that you did not see it live because you were only a year old.
You're right. I didn't see it live. What am I saying? It's 1990. I was born in 89. But I did see it because they aired it all the time on TV.
I know. I'm picking on you.
Simple math. I went to college.
She was in her little car seat, or her little bouncy seat or whatever, and then by osmosis, maybe your dad was watching it.
He could have
somehow it, like, by osmosis.
This is why I love horror, because I was in the room with my parents when they were watching it for the first time, and then I was like, later in life, I will watch it on TV and love it, and all things horror as well.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Anyway, I obviously didn't watch it live. That was a dumb statement. I don't think I watched it live. Well, yeah, I didn't. But anyway, I did watch it on TV.
Actually, you were alive when you watched it.
Yeah. I did watch it on TV as a kid with commercials. Not the first time it ever aired. But anyway, I loved it. It has a very special place in my heart because...
You love Tim Curry.
Well, I think I love Tim Curry because of the movie.
Oh, really?
Because I watched it, of course, before Rocky Horror Picture, even though I did watch Rocky Horror before I should have watched that type of movie. But it was definitely one of the early things. I mean, I watched it long before Clue. I watched it long before, of course, Tales from the Crypt, where he guest appeared on an episode of that. I would have never watched that as a kid. Because it's like... Anyway, Tim Curry's playing a woman and all these other people. It's very disturbing. That's one of the most disturbing episodes of Tales from the Crypt. But anyway, I did watch Ferngully, which he's the voice of the bad guy, but I wouldn't have really fathomed that as a kid. But anyway, I do love Tim Curry now, but back then, it was one of the first things that actually scared me. And it really affected me. But I watched it like it was a tradition. Even though it scared the hell out of me, I kept watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, it stopped being so scary. And it was almost like a tradition, something I look forward to.
Something that you love.
Yes, exactly. And so, yes, I literally, you guys don't even know, I've got earrings on today.
I love the earrings.
I've got a shirt. I've got flipping shoes on right now. And you can't see it, but I also put on thematic socks. Yes. I have literally every piece of clothing except my... shorts are
Pennywise. I'm getting an ab workout laughing so much over here.
So yes, I've always loved the made-for-TV movie. But I will say the weak part is the adults, and as I said before, that would be my criticism, is the casting of the adults. It seemed like they just wanted to use network people. They could have picked a little bit better actors to be more suited to the characters, like Bill.
Well, I mean, back in the day, it really didn't bother me so much because that's who was on television at that time.
Right.
Okay. Looking back at it, it was more like nostalgic for me because I loved many of those actors.
Well, yeah, they're great
because
actors.
Of other things that they had been in, but I was sort of like, man, this is kind of flat.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of thing. But let's talk about those actors. Bill Denbrough is played by Richard Thomas. And Richard Thomas, for those of you who don't know, he played John Boy on the Waltons for many years. He's still acting. In fact,
he was on Ozark recently.
Well, and also he is touring live in To Kill a Mockingbird, which is coming to the Sanger in this next season.
Oh, really?
So I wouldn't really mind. I mean, I would like to go see it if possible.
That's a local theater.
First of all, I love the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and it would be neat to see Richard Thomas do it.
I'm not saying he's a bad actor.
No.
I'm just saying as Bill, it's a little weird.
Yeah, and he wasn't as charismatic.
Ponytail.
Well, that I didn't like. That was like a poor choice.
Why did they do the ponytail?
I don't even know.
Why?
I mean, it was just kind of weird. But as an actor, I like Richard Thomas. But let me just tell you a little fun fact about him. And this makes me afraid about being cremated because I saw this. Richard Thomas was in a made-for-TV show called Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is based on Stephen King's short stories. There is a story called Autopsy Room 4. He plays this guy, Howard, who is golfing, and he gets bit by a snake. And it paralyzes him.
So he's not dead.
And he's not dead. And he actually witnesses himself going through an autopsy. So I have told my family, because I want to be cremated when I, transition. And I'm like, you better make sure I am super cold, cold as ice. Okay. And that you do something to make sure that I'm not just paralyzed. You've got to make sure.
Like it's your final wishes to make sure.
Because I do not want to, be cremated and going in,
Thanks a lot, Richard Thomas.
But Richard Thomas, I'm telling you, I saw that was back in 2006 when that program was on. And ever since then, I'm like, that's the one thing I'm a little on the fence because I don't want to be buried. But it's sort of like, okay, just make sure. Sorry about that little tangent. But anyway, Richard Thomas has been in something else. But Ben Hanscom is played by John Ritter, who
another actor I love.
Adore.
But I don't know if he was the greatest adult Ben.
I don't know if he was either.
Because he was super sappy and it was out of place. I'm not saying he couldn't do drama, but like it just felt weird.
I actually forgot that he was. I remembered Richard Thomas being Bill, but I forgot about John Ritter being in it. And unfortunately John Ritter is not with us any longer. But I mean, John Ritter was a wonderful actor. I mean, he was even in Buffy.
I know. Robot Dad.
Yeah. So good.
Or stepdad, or whatever you want to. He didn't marry her, right. Buffy's mom, but he wanted to.
Potential stepfather.
Yes.
Eddie was played by Dennis Christopher, and of course, I'm just referencing the adult actors.
So, by the way, Dennis Christopher, I believe, starred in one of my favorite movies, which I haven't seen in forever, Breaking Away.
Oh, really?
The funny thing is, I love Breaking Away. I don't like him as Eddie, though, as adult Eddie, personally.
He may have been in other things that I've watched, and I just don't remember him at all.
Like I said, I didn't even know it was him in Breaking Away, but this documentary I just watched, behind the story of it, they were like, they showed the posters of the movies he had been in, and I was like, Breaking Away? I was like, Breaking Away! It's a great movie about, like, bicycle racing, and this guy who, like,
breaks away?
Kinda. And he's in a small town, and he wants to kind of break out of that, and he wants to be, like, an Italian, like, bicycle racer, and but he was facing a lot of things at home and in the town. Anyway, it's great. It's a great story, but it's more of a drama.
Right.
But I didn't like him in this role as Eddie.
He was my least favorite as far as
say he's my least
favorite
for
Eddie at all.
Mike actually, Tim Reed was my favorite.
Now Mike Hanlon is played by Tim Reed, WKRP in Cincinnati. Also, Frank's Place was two of the shows that he was famous for being on back in the day. I thought he did a great job. Richie is played by Harry Anderson, who was
I didn't like the adult Richie.
He was in Night Court, but I didn't like his version of Richie.
I didn't like it either, but he did actually do comedy like in real life, the actor.
Right.
So I guess that's why they went with him. Again, he's a network actor too. They had to have in a list of approved actors to do the adult roles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. Like, these people were already on TV. They were already working together at some times. They knew each other. And they did spend time with the kid actors. Here's a tidbit as well, so that they could actually, like,
get to know them.
And all the actors came up with their own. Like, if you notice, like, Bill did this thing. Like, the kid Bill did this, and the adult Bill did this. The kid Stanley pulled on his ear. The adults, they all came up with that together, the kids and the adults. They're like, cool. Let's come up with something like Ben Ritter and his child actor. They discovered Let Me Bite My Thumb. They came up with it together. Wow. And they had a little mini camp where the adults and the kids, they spent 3 days together before filming to really get to know each other. Very cool. And I think it came across, but I didn't think it come across in like looks or, I don't know. I just think there was a disconnect between the kids and the adults.
I mean,
even
I
though
agree.
They tried.
I agree. Beverly Marsh is played by Annette O'Toole. Some people may remember her from like Smallville, Superman. I think she was actually in 11/22/63, if I'm not mistaken, the adaptation. Stanley Uris is played by Richard Masur, which you should know him from the Mr. Boogedy thing.
Oh, yes, he was the dad in Mr. Boogedy.
Of course, Pennywise is Tim Curry. I don't know if you noticed that Audra was played by the Black Christmas 1974 actress, Olivia Hussey.
I did not realize that, but once you said it, yes.
Yes.
And of course, Seth Green is
Seth
Kid
Green, yes. So I didn't list all the kid actors. It was just too much to go into that. So the most prominent is Seth Green, of course, Oz from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Family Guy, so much stuff.
The last person I have to shout out is William B. Davis. He plays Cigarette Smoking Man on the X-Files. And he was Mr. Goodrial or something like that. He was the teacher that was in the cafeteria that Richie runs into after dealing with the bullies.
So very small role, but
role, but I mean, a character actor that's been around for a long time, but he has a big position or role in the X-Files. So anyway, like, I agree with you as far as what you're saying. I agree that the child actors were better as far. I just think the casting of the adults, the chemistry between them two was a little flat. Whereas the chemistry with the kids was a little bit.
But the funny thing is, in the documentary, they talk about how they were all actually friends with the adult actors that had worked together before. So it was like a big party when they were like between takes, and they had to be asked to like quiet down. Like, and the director was getting pissed off because they were goofing off, you know.
Oh, wow.
So the funny thing is, so they're close, but it's like not coming across. It's kind of very, I don't know, forced. But the greatest part is, so Richard, what's his name? Richard Thomas was like, so I haven't rewatched the movie partly because I'm mortified at the scene where he's coming out of the hotel and he's telling them, we've got to stay together. And then they all hug. After Mike gets stabbed, essentially they're like all consider calling it quits. But Bill's like, come on, we got to do this. Anyway, he's like, I'm really afraid to rewatch that because I'm thinking in my head, was that as hokey as I feel like it was when I did that? So he's even criticizing himself. And I was like, I gotta admit, he played it a little hokey. My favorite part is at the very end where he's got Audra on the bicycle. By the way, he really had to do that.
Oh, did he?
And he said that she was so afraid that he was going to kill her going down. And she was like, had a look of fear. And he also was afraid he was going to kill her. He was like, oh my God, she's going to fall off the bike. Anyway, I love when he's like, beat it, Audra, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it, Audra. I always used to, like, for no reason, I'll tell, like, Paul, I'll be like, beat it, Audra, beat it, beat it. Anyway, I don't know why that line gets to me, but it makes me laugh every time. So, like, when I rewatched it last night, because that's when I rewatched the original, I get to that part, I'm like, yes, here's the part. Beat it, Audra, beat it, beat it. Because it's so over the top and corny. It's the worst. And I was like, oh my God, it's so bad. But it's also great. And
it is. Although I was like, I cannot wait to talk to Kelsi about Stanley's wife when she finds out. I'm like, this is on the same level, and I wish I should have looked up who the actress was, but this is on the same level as the mailman on the bicycle.
Yes.
And Gary Busey.
Because they replayed that scene in the documentary that I just watched. So we watched the documentary right before he came over. Paul, my boyfriend, was watching it with me. And they replayed the Stanley scene where he's found in the bathtub and his wife's like,
The scene is hilarious. Yes, it is. It's hilarious.
It is.
And I feel bad for her because it is kind of hard. I mean, I'm just gonna say, as an actor, it is hard sometimes to pretend that if you don't have anything to pull from at the moment. And we don't know if she shot the scene actually looking at him. Believe it or not, sometimes you have to film your scene without anything, and you just have to pull it from within. And if you aren't feeling it that day, or
they said that the kids, when they're looking through the photo album and that iconic scene where it's the photograph of the circus like on the street and it comes to life, they were looking at like a blank page and there was a hole in the page, and then so the director's arm is what came out. So all the actors were like, we were like amazed when we saw the finished scene. And also they had to rig this really intricate device to make the pages flip back and forth because they just didn't have special effects budget to do things in post. They had to do things physical, and I actually think the movie's strength is the physical and the practical effects, I should say, because I feel like, and it's jumping into the new one, but my big criticism with the new one is not the acting, because I think actually it's pretty well cast. It's the story deviates a lot, not only in time setting, in terms of they changed the whole time period, for, I guess, to make it more relevant and more modern.
Yes.
But also, I hate the CGI, and I hate it more now after rewatching it. Now, part one's okay, but it's still got some cheesy parts. Now, there is some legit scary parts in the new movies, but I think especially part two, it becomes so cartoonish, like Mrs. Kirsch. It's ridiculous. That woman with like the hanging boobs, like it looks like the leper. Like you could just use someone in makeup that's really creepy, like their face is falling off. So I feel like going the practical route, even though it was because of limitations and budget, I think that makes parts of, and it could be nostalgia talking, because I do love that movie more.
And you do like cheese.
I do like cheese, but there were some great practical effects. Like when you're talking about the battery acid, where Pennywise's face, it's like stuck, and he's like, "This is battery acid, you slime." And the half face, I mean, this is marvelous. I mean, you can't really completely see it here, but that's his face melted with the battery acid, and it looked great. Now the spider didn't look great, but it could have if they shot it right.
If they would have done
and the director even said, so he wasn't there for the lighting. It's called like a session. So he was actually working on another show, and he gave instructions to somebody who was sitting in for him, and the person didn't fully understand what the director wanted. So they lit it, or they brightened it way too much, and the director didn't get to take down the levels. So where you couldn't see as much of the flaws, they really probably should have shot more of the spider, like I told you, but they kept saying, "Cut, we got it, we got it." Even though the puppeteers were like, "No, it could do so much more." It had like dripping like slime. Like you should see the footage. You've got to watch this documentary. It'll blow your mind, guys. The Pennywise, the story of it. Like I'm only telling you a fraction of the tidbits. And the fact that they got a Tim Curry interview is a big deal, especially because Tim Curry suffered a stroke a few years ago. So Tim Curry's interviewed in this documentary, and you know he doesn't have a huge long interview, but it's great the little tidbits that are in there. And I think the movie is really great, even though I've got a bias with it. I do think it did well with the restrictions.
I do too.
And it does have weaknesses. No, don't get me wrong. I could, like I said, beat it, Audra, beat it. Like that's ridiculous, the spider. But at the same time, it's also like I rewatched the Mrs. Kirsch scene. To me, it's so much better than the new Mrs. Kirsch scene.
I mean, there's a lot of creepy parts in it. Like if you put yourself in that situation, it's creepy. You know what I'm saying? All like effects and all that aside, you know, and then you also have the backstory. So you're visually seeing something that was scaring you when you were reading it.
Right.
One thing I have to say is the 1990 movie opens differently with the fact that we see a little girl named Lori Ann ride on her little bicycle to get home before the storm. And then we get we get to see a Pennywise. We're not starting off with Georgie. You know, so we see that. And then, of course, Mike comes in on the scene. Mike, you know, is talking to a detective. And then he finds the picture of Georgie. And then our movie starts because he starts narrating about what's going to happen. So I thought that was a little more interesting than just starting off necessarily with the scene of Georgie.
I think it was
both
great
in the book and in the movie.
It catches viewers right away, I think. It's a good setup.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, they couldn't do the hate crime. I don't think they could go that direction. So they were limited.
They could do that. And also, too, I read in our little magazine that we have here, our Stephen King guide, the standards and it's how it's portrayed. Let me see. It's called
Standards and Practices, I think. I can't remember, but I think it's that.
Yes, it's the cardinal rule of Standards and Practices Division of the network is to not show kids in jeopardy. So that's why you couldn't have the scene with Georgie having his arm ripped off at the very beginning.
Right, but they did have some kid scenes in jeopardy, and they wanted those cut. And this is where the director had to say, no, it's not technically showing the kids in jeopardy because you know they're going to be all right because it's the adults remembering their experiences,
right.
And we know that they're all right.
Exactly.
So that's how they convinced the Standards and Practices to let it be aired the way it was because they wanted it more cut. They denied it. Once the director said, okay, well, you know the kids are okay because they're adults.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, the whole scene with the little Lori Ann, you know, at first she thinks he's a good clown, and then you can see his expression. You know, the sheets keep going in front of him, and you see how he transforms from that happy clown to like killer clown, and then how he imposes on her. You don't see anything happen, but then we know something happened because she's taken off in a body bag. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you at that point have to make that. I don't think you necessarily have to see that. It doesn't make the movie bad because you didn't see it.
Sometimes I think it's better because the movie Jaws, like I wouldn't have mind seeing Georgie's arm, but the interaction between Tim Curry as Pennywise and little Georgie, that is frightening enough where you see the big teeth. It's almost like that was so effective. Like in Jaws, you don't really see the shark that much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you always need to see everything. In fact, a big criticism, like I said, going back to the new chapter 1 of It, which I do like more than chapter 2, I think the sewer scene is so cartoonish and ridiculous of Georgie getting his arm ripped off. I hate that part. I like a lot of chapter 1, but I hate the part with Georgie getting his arm ripped off because it looks so cartoonish. There's just so many parts of that movie that don't scare me that I think look cartoonish, and that's one of the scenes. Now it's cool seeing him flailing with the like empty arm, yeah, I guess. But almost like to me, it was cooler seeing in the 1990 version. Just all you have to see is him. That's creepy enough,
right?
In my opinion, in some ways, in some instances.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, what's crazy is Pennywise, Tim Curry's Pennywise, is only on the screen for about 20 minutes of the film.
Wow, I didn't even realize that.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, now you were talking about him taking the role. At first, he wasn't going to take the role because he was in Ridley Scott's movie, and he was kind of worried about how long it was going to take for him to do makeup and stuff. And it said about 3 hours. Was that confirmed? How long it took?
It didn't
go into all that.
It wasn't confirmed how long it took, but the documentary did discuss how Tim Curry fought to have no prosthetics on his face.
Yes.
They went through
They went minimal makeup and stuff like that.
And partly because he had just done Legend.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was covered in, like, his whole face was covered in prosthetics. And it's not that he didn't like that he wasn't a trooper.
He just didn't want to go through that again after just recently doing Legend.
I don't think it was just that. I think it was also partly he wanted his face to act. He wanted his face to tell the story. Because they were starting to go through all these tests of different prosthetics. And he said, if you want somebody who's just going to wear something on his face to make it scary, you're looking at the wrong actor. Just have me be a clown. A regular clown, and I will make it scary.
And
That's
I think,
literally what he said.
It was wonderful. Do you realize Alice Cooper was looked at?
They talked about that. And Roddy McDowell, which I cannot see.
I cannot either. Alice Cooper, I'm not sure about that. I love Alice Cooper, don't get me wrong.
Yes, but
as a musician, as a singer.
Of course.
I'm not sure if he could have pulled it off because I've seen Tim Curry.
I mean, Tim Curry's facial expressions, his voice, and he brings like a humor to it too. But then he could switch that to be creepy.
Yes.
So to me, it's like Tim Curry is the reason why we're still talking about the miniseries.
And that's what they said. Even though he was only in it for about 20 minutes of the show as a whole, he made such an impression in those 20 minutes, which was awesome.
Guys, who's your favorite Pennywise? Is it Skarsgård or is it Tim Curry? I can't imagine people saying it's Skarsgård, but I know you like both. But I did like both. But after like rewatching, especially chapter 2, I was like, oh my god, it's so cartoonish. There are like 3 instances where I like Skarsgård in the movies, the 2 movies. Then after that, I'm like, it's cartoonish. I don't like it anymore. It's the sewer with Georgie before he rips his arm off, where he's just talking to him. I like that with Skarsgård. There's another with the little girl under the bleachers. I like that. I think that's creepy Skarsgård, where he's just drooling and he like looks off into nothing. Creepy Skarsgård.
Which those teeth he put in makes him drool on purpose.
Oh yeah, I would, because they look like buck teeth.
Yeah.
I feel like once they start bringing the CGI in, it loses it. It loses him. And that's what Tim Curry fought for. And I think that's a pro because back then they couldn't do these types of, so it's almost a good thing.
And the thing that's really great about Tim Curry is he stayed in character. And like a lot of the people didn't want to be around him on set
growled
because
at people.
like the kids and stuff, like he would be Pennywise.
Yeah.
Even like if they were not shooting the scene. And so like freak people out. Like he was just really creepy in general. Just other things I thought about it is the children in the 1990 movie just seem younger to me, more naive, more innocent than they did.
Which is like in the book too.
Right. Which even the kids in the book seem a little more
edgier, a tiny bit,
but I don't know, they just seemed a little more innocent. Now it might be because of what they could and could not do as far as the standards. Also, they did not cut their palms
because they couldn't show that because of AIDS. They talked about that in the documentary as well.
I was curious about that, if they were able to do that.
Well, they didn't even cut Ben's belly.
Right.
Henry was about to carve in his H, guys, the bullying scene, but he stops and you don't ever see any, he doesn't get his flesh marked at all.
Right.
So that's another reason they couldn't show that. They couldn't show his skin being punctured.
Yeah, I don't think Henry was as brutal as he was in the book.
The actor who played Henry said, I wish we could have gone the extra step and showed the violence, but he said that the scene in the sewer with the pipe right before Belch is taken into the pipe and folded, which was really cool.
I thought that was pretty cool.
They talked about that special effect. And again, that is practical effects. And that is so well done. To me, that is just as scary as anything in the new It. Like the giant spider with Bill Skarsgård's head does not scare me. The leopard does not scare me because it's cartoonish to me. But Belch being folded in half and looking like Belch, that scares me. So I'm like, hell yeah, this is great. But I mean, in that scene, Henry said, the actor who played Henry said, that's as closest as we get to a hint of Henry's capable of anything, because he says, what are your last words before I kill you? And he's like unbuttoning his shirt with like a knife, and you really think something more is going to go down. So the actor would even wanted more violence, but you can't.
You just can't.
Yeah.
Now, I did love that Bill is a horror writer.
Yeah, I like that too.
And his book is called The Glowing.
Yeah,
which is kind of like The Shining.
Yes, I liked that too.
I thought that was funny. Let's see, some other things. Oh, one thing that I noticed, Beverly's mom's alive in the book. And her father is not a drunk in the book. Now, he is a janitor at a hospital, but in the movie, he's a janitor at her school, which I do think kind of plays on her being poor and being an outcast, because I could see kids making fun of her because her dad is a janitor. But I just found the dad in the 1990 version was not the scariest version, like the most abusive out of all of them.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I think he did a good job though, because he was actually cast against character. That actor played like a lot of like good guy roles, and they didn't want to cast him. They didn't even want to see his audition at first because like, he can't play this bad guy. But I think he did a good job. But I think his scariest part is they dressed him up as Mrs. Kirsch, where she's all deformed. So it's actually him in Mrs. Kirsch's makeup, like in her wig and black dress, but he's like deformed, like he's a corpse. So I think that's his scariest part, not him as the human abuser. Not his fault. I think he couldn't be as overtly like putting his hands on her and being as mean to her as he would have been able to.
Well, and I had a feeling I had to do that, but I'm just curious as to why Beverly's mom was not alive.
I don't know,
because that's basically what helped Beverly a lot of times, was the mom kind of buffered things.
But the mom suspected something was up, because it's almost like she knew that her husband almost like got off on hitting Beverly.
Right.
And
but do you wonder if, I often wondered, and I mean, I don't know, maybe I missed this whole thing with this. I didn't think in the book that he did anything to her, like abusive sexually.
He didn't.
I almost was wondering if he beat her so that he would not cross the line.
Yes, that
is what I thought. Whereas the father in the 2017 version, to me, made it seem like he had hurt her sexually.
No, yes, I got the gist in the 2017 version that he was abusive sexually, whereas in the book, it even explicitly says, because at the very end, when he's almost possessed by Pennywise or, Bob, that's when he says, "Take off your pants, I want to check you." And she makes some kind of comment like he'd never done that before, and she knew it was just Pennywise, but it still freaked her out. And I think when he was possessed by Pennywise, he says, "I beat you because I want to F you," or there was something where he's dressed up as Mrs. Kirsch when she goes back as an adult.
Right.
And he says, "I beat you so I wouldn't F you," or something like that.
Yeah, so
it's
that's what I got from it, because I
Yes.
was like, that was the way he could make sure he controlled that aspect of it. But I thought that was interesting that Beverly's mom does not appear in either one. Was it a choice because they didn't want an extra character that they had to flesh out and deal with? Sometimes that's the case. If they get this is already character.
I guess they could
driven enough.
They thought they could portray the abusiveness without a third character in there. They could subtly, say all that they needed to say with just two characters, I suppose.
And I'm just wondering also too if that's why they left Eddie's mom, not having Eddie's wife in the TV
they didn't
movie.
need more characters.
Right, they didn't need more characters.
Because we're never going to see her again. She had such a smaller part in the 1990 version versus even the 2017 and 2019 versions. Mm-hmm. I think she had an overall smaller part.
Well, we have people weighing in on who their favorites are.
And also which movie is their favorite. Let's look at that too real quick. Crystal says, "I think the older adaptation is my fave, but really because of the nostalgia." Me too, kind of. She said, "I watched it when it came out and it was so scary, but I did enjoy the new movies too. I like what they did with the story." Now, I will say, so something that the new one did that the old one left out was the house on Neibolt Street.
Yes.
That is the biggest change and they did reference and allude to the Chud, but they did it. I don't like how they changed it. They changed the whole thing.
Yeah.
So to me,
that's one of the things
I got turned off,
for.
and we'll talk about that further. Yeah. But Katrina says, "The show terrified me as a child, and the 2017 movie terrified me as an adult." I did like part 1 a lot when I saw it in the theater. Mm-hmm. And even when we rewatched it right before part 2 came out. But this most recent time that I rewatched it this last month.
And I think it's because you've been influenced by the book.
I think so too. Mm-hmm. It just kind of changed, and I'm like, man, they took a lot of liberties.
Well, and it's the same thing with me because I saw the movie before rereading it.
Yeah.
So I had not remembered a lot of the details.
Right. And Crystal said she even recorded it live. So she watched it live, and she
on
watched
your VCR.
Yes, and she watched it over and over again on VHS. And this is a good observation by Katrina. You're right, Katrina. When it was on the made-for-TV movie, it got 30 million views every night when it was airing live. It was huge. And I think,
yeah, because actually before it was even published, they were trying to get the rights to this.
Yes,
they knew that this was going to be big, and they wanted to, have it on the air.
The guy who helped get it adapted was sent the manuscript, like not even like a print version of it. He was sent a manuscript of it that was in 2 huge boxes, apparently. So DJ says, "I read about it for months in Fangoria, then rented it on video." Let's see.
Oh, look, Jamie said she didn't mind my tangent.
She just doesn't want an autopsy.
I don't want an autopsy either.
I know, especially not you.
Especially if I'm alive.
Of course. Halko says, "Skarsgård did a good job, but Tim Curry is my Pennywise." I feel the same way. He did such an amazing job and actually scared me. I gotta say, I agree. Richard Brown said Tim Curry was more subtle. I think he was subtle at times, but also he was really like his inflections and facial expressions were really powerful.
Actually, just even his eyes.
His eyes are so big.
Something about when he could do things with his eyes, and then even just how, like when he was in the library telling those jokes and stuff like that. I mean, it was just like so good, so good.
Jamie says she likes both Curry and Skarsgård. Again, Curry's my Pennywise. I gotta say, always will be. I will not buy one piece of merch with. Sorry, Bill Skarsgård. I will not buy one piece of merch. No.
That's so
I will not buy a poster. No. Not that it's bad. Like, he had some great parts.
Oh, I think so.
His voice, what he did with the voice. I mean, imagine being cast in that role and having to attempt to come close to, because Tim Curry's performance has become almost like cult level.
Yes.
Like iconic.
Yes.
In a way, because even if you think the made-for-TV movie is corny, you know about you've seen the imagery of Tim Curry dressed as Pennywise. It's become like a horror icon. Like he is shown alongside Michael Myers. And so imagine getting that role as Bill Skarsgård and you're like, what can I do to make it my own?
Right.
It must be intimidating. So I'm saying I'm giving him props because he had to do something different with it. He had to.
Mm-hmm.
So go on with more of your favorite scenes.
Well, these are some of my favorite scenes. I loved when Mike was in the library and he kind of fall asleep, I think. And then he wakes up and there's those muddy footprints. Like he knows that he's been there. I love the library just like I love a bookstore. A library is a wonderful place to be, but it also can be an extremely creepy place, especially at nighttime and nobody's there. Yeah. And if you've read something or you know something's happening, which he knows this is all, this killer is coming back. I just thought that to me was very unsettling. Like if that would have happened to me, I would have probably crapped on myself. Because I'm like, how can I get out of here? Is he still in here? Yeah. Kind of thing. Am I going to live? I did like Stan's talking head in the refrigerator.
I love that.
I thought that was
so the actor talked about how pissed off, like he hated being in that fridge.
I just think it was great.
So the actor, he's actually like his head, and he's like, I think he's standing, but they were putting drinks next to him. He's like, can we just shoot this thing? Like he was really annoyed by I guess he couldn't stand the prosthetics, around his head. Because I think they had to do something where they put a shelf, his head through a shelf.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Anyway, he hated it. He was so pissed off. He said, but it came out so great.
Oh, I think it's one of my favorite scenes. The graveyard scene with Bill and Pennywise when he goes to visit Georgie's grave, and it's all the empty graves except for the one that's for Stanley. And at first he doesn't realize, because he doesn't know at that point that Stanley's not, going to make it. I did enjoy the bike scene between Mike and Bill
with the music, the cheesy music.
I liked it. Sweet. I really did. I thought it was sweet. It kind of showed it kind of gave you a little more sense of how close everybody was as children. And I think that's probably about the closest they got really as adults.
And honestly, I thought Bill and Mike were the best together in terms of the adult actors.
Yes, I did too.
Because it just felt more natural to me, that bike scene. Whereas when they're at the restaurant, Ben being like, this is how I lost weight. Oh, Beverly. I don't know. Anyway, John Ritter's like he's constantly rubbing Beverly.
Right.
And he's rubbing her the whole movie. I'm like, okay, whatever.
I know. It was just very weird.
And then and then Beverly's looking at Bill and she's like, I don't know.
I just thought she was just really overly flirtatious, and I guess
she
that's
goes
how
up
she
and
was
makes
supposed
out
to
with
play.
them.
I know, but I'm just saying overall, just compared to the newer movie too.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
In the newer movie, she's really not that flirtatious.
Well, also too the fact that they're not supposed to really be remembering anything, but she sure does remember these guys, kind of thing. I love the werewolf scene with Seth Green playing Richie.
Oh, me too.
I thought that was hilarious. And I also like the Chinese restaurant scene.
I love the Chinese restaurant scene.
Do they talk about in the documentary about the puppeteers being under the table?
I don't think they talk about them being under the table, but they talked about how they kept what was in the fortune cookies hidden, and they talked about how they had one shot at these practical effects, because again, this is more practical effects and they're expensive to redo, so they had to get it right. I love the eyeball. That's my favorite fortune cookie, is the eyeball, and it has a bigger meaning obviously in the novel why it's an eyeball, because Richie and his glasses, and it has a big meaning. But I just thought that was so well done and it looked really real. And again, it shows what you could do with practical effects. I'm just someone who prefers practical effects because CGI just doesn't have that depth to me. It doesn't feel like there's texture to it. You can feel that it's not real when you're looking at it.
Well, I guess if you would see something, it would not be looking crisp or like that. It would look more practical if it was happening in real life. For example, if your microphone all of a sudden sprouted legs right here, it would look different than if the computer generated.
It wouldn't look crisp as hell,
right?
Compared to us.
Exactly.
So that's what throws me off. I'm so even the eyeball comes out of the whole fortune cookie in the new one, it's writhing around on the table. I still prefer the eyeball in the fortune cookie just looking around. I think it looks more real to me too. Halko agrees with me. I prefer practical effects. I just think it looks more textured overall. I will say one more comment about this. Apparently, one of the early versions of the script for part 2, they had Beverly's husband playing a bigger role. He does play a bigger role in the novel as well, but not that big. He does follow Bev. He does kind of kidnap Audrey and bring her down into the sewers. However, we never get a face-off with Bev and the husband or the ex.
Which I hated. The husband.
Me too. But I hated how we didn't get a final, her getting the last laugh, even down in the sewer.
And the crazy thing too, in the 1990 version, and I guess it's another thing where they didn't want to bring in another character. They're not even married. In the 1990 version, they live together and he's her partner or whatever. But they don't even have this knockdown drag out fight. I think she has a jar of face cream. She knocks him
just
in the thing, and then I'm leaving, and then that's the end of it, and then she's back with her guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it was so tame compared
to the book and
oh my gosh,
remake.
The book was terrible. The book, the fact that he goes after Kay and what he does to Kay.
Friend,
and I mean, he was just so scary. It was the people, the most abusive people in this story, the scare, that's where you got, okay, they're monsters, but you also have to be fearful of those
humans, monsters.
And if you think about it, Beverly had 2 of them in her life, her dad as well as Tom.
Yes.
And then Henry, who was terrible, but his father was terrible.
Yeah. So I will say, the original idea for part 2 was that he would follow her, but I think something happens to him and he gets reanimated by Pennywise, and he is almost the final person.
I'm glad they didn't do that.
I'm so glad too, because it would have been terrible. It would have.
I wouldn't have liked that at all.
Even the filmmakers were we can't do this.
I would not have liked that at all.
By the way, I wanted to mention Belch. The bad kid Belch, the actor who played him is the same actor who plays the main bully in Neverending Story. So if you guys are familiar with Neverending Story, the end of the story, he's on Falkar and he's chasing the bullies as his last wish, and he's going, yeah, and he chases the bullies into the dumpster. The main bully with curly hair and a baseball hat, I think he has on. No, he doesn't have a hat. But anyway, he's got curly blondish hair. It's Belch. The same actor.
Well, and also too, talking about actors, the guy who is talking at Ben's meeting, the guy who stands up and is talking at Ben's meeting, is the kid actor Ben from 1990, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love all the how people mesh over, and you see him in other stuff. And
2 more things about the old movie. I promise.
No,
I mean, this is one of my favorite horror movies. It's one of the things that got me into horror. As you could see, I own so much this isn't the only pair of socks that I own either, by the way. I own friggin' 5 or 6 pairs of old school It socks, not new school, old school. So another interesting fact is the people from 1990, they thought about putting Tim Curry's clown face on the spider, and obviously the new movie did that. They thought about it, but they couldn't make it work. They said they wish they could have figured it.
Do that.
Well, they didn't. They wanted a goodbye for Tim Curry. They were disappointed with how they never got closure, because Tim Curry almost outshined the spider, obviously. And they wanted they even thought about the final shot, when they knocked the spider over, almost he transforms back into Pennywise. And I kind of do wish they would have done that.
Mm-hmm.
That way, at least for the movie version, you would have gotten they defeated this entity that was in this particular shape for the entire movie.
Right.
And Tim Curry would have gotten a send-off, a villain send-off.
Right.
So I do kind of wish that, even though it wouldn't have been accurate to the book. But so they kind of are sad that, Pennywise, the last thing we see is this mirage of him on the sewer. It's not even a real image of him. So they said they couldn't figure out how to have him, in a final scene. And they do wish they could change that. And also, it won for Best Music. I think it won an Emmy for Best Score. And I do like the score because nothing in the new movie really sticks out to me in terms of the score. I do think I have some of the creepy music on my my Spotify, I should say, for Halloween time. I always listen to it. It's on my Halloween playlist for spooky music. So, I mean, I don't know. I prefer the old one. That's just me. But let's go into the new one if you want.
She loves Tim Curry. She loves cheese and corn. She loves practical effects.
I do, but I love cheese and corn, but I think it was more faithful. But despite not having Neibolt Street, I think it's more faithful.
Actually, I do love it as well. I mean, I won't say that. I mean, there are things about it that are great. There are things that they could have probably done better. I honestly think no matter what adaptation they would do, what actors they would get, the kids are always going to outshine the adults.
I think
because the story is really about the kids.
It is.
You know, more so than the adults. They could get all Oscar winners playing, you know, the adult parts.
Because I did like the adults, even in the new version. I thought the adults were better cast. They looked like they're younger people better.
But I do have criticisms about how they were portrayed. More so,
I like to hear them,
and you know, in the other. But you know, on our ranking of best screen adaptations, it is number 2.
Which
Believe
version?
it or not, 2017.
2017?
Yes.
Well, I do like part 1 better than part 2, but I think the original movie is more faithful. I don't know. I think it's more faithful.
They put it as number 2, and when they chose the villain, of course, they put the villain as Pennywise. They have a picture of Bill in there, as opposed to Tim Curry. So I'm just wondering if it's because they did screen adaptation instead of small screen adaptation.
Oh, that could be. That could be.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, I think that's okay in the sense, at least it made it on there. And the fact that both of them were mentioned as good adaptations.
Mm-hmm,
yes. You know, believe me, it's not the worst.
Oh, of course not. No, we've saw some Langoliers.
The Langoliers. Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit about who did what to set us up for 2017-2019, because it's 2 parts, chapter 1, chapter 2. Our director is actually from Argentina. His name is Andy Muschietti. I'm apologizing if I didn't say that correctly.
That sounds like it's accurate.
He actually made the movie Mama. If you have not seen that, I would recommend it.
Oh, I did like it.
About the 2 girls in that little cabin. Jessica Chastain is in that.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat because she's also cast in this one. Producer was Seth Grahame-Smith, who is an author I like. He's the one that did Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. He wrote those books. I like those books. He was an executive producer for Chapter 2. IMDb has 7.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, 86%. And Google users, 83%. If you compare it to the 1990 version, not much higher. I mean,
kind of, though.
Maybe so in Rotten Tomatoes, but 6.8 and 7.3 for IMDb is not that far away from each other. And Google users, 83% and 84%. 1990 was 84% for Google users.
So that's actually higher.
So it was a percentage point higher.
I think it's more iconic, honestly, to me, 1990.
So, I mean, so those are the stats for that. I did not look into the children actors again, although
Stranger Things.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's kind of crazy that he's in Stranger Things, which is in the 80s, and then you've got It taking place in the 80s, that he's a child actor for that.
And I think
I'm wondering if
they changed the decade also because 80s nostalgia is super hot right now because of Stranger Things. So maybe that went into the thought process of, okay, let's change it from the flipping 50s to the 90s to the 80s to the now.
Maybe so.
I don't know.
But, well, you can get away with a lot of liberties because of the time period, and one of them is language. You know,
I think there was a lot of cursing. I'm not sure there needed to be as much cursing.
Well, they really made Richie more foul mouth than like joking clown, more of a clown. I mean, I know they called him trash mouth, but I just didn't. I don't. If he was cursing a lot in the book, it didn't faze me. Like it didn't bother me. Like it didn't stand out to me.
But Eddie cursed a lot
too. But
it
did stand out in the 2017 version. I'm just saying. And not that I'm saying I don't ever use foul language. It's just that sometimes it seemed forced. Like, oh, let us have these words in here like for shock value or something. But anyway, Bill Denbrough is played by James McAvoy, who I really like. He's a fabulous actor. Ben is played by Jay Ryan. I don't know him in anything besides this. Eddie is James Ransone, which is funny.
Eddie looked just like James looked just like that kid actor.
Yes.
That was perfect casting in terms of the looks.
And I liked him. I liked him as the adult Eddie.
I liked him much better.
Yes.
Yes.
He was recently played Max in The Black Phone, which is a Joe
I
Hill.
still haven't seen it yet. I want to read the story.
So good. You got to read the story.
I know.
It's super short.
I got to read it.
Super short and really good. And so just a shout out
to him. I've been avoiding the trailer because I'm like, I don't want to see it until I read the freaking story.
I thought they did a great job considering, Mike Hanlon, played by Isaiah Mustafa, which I don't know him in anything else. Bill Hader plays Richie.
I think he was a good adult Richie, but again, it's like the writing made I just thought he was more foul-mouthed.
Yes.
You can't have him be as hokey as adult Richie in the 1990, because I did think he was hokey. I didn't even think like the parts that were supposed to be funny were funny in the 1990. Like, he's supposed to be a comedian, but he didn't make me laugh at all. But
well, there was something else going on with Richie in here. Right. And that's the thing. Stephen King never intended him to be gay.
But did he intend Eddie to be gay?
He's not. No, he didn't want any of them to be. That was not his intention. But he's not upset that they went that route. The director or the screenwriter took the liberties to do that. I don't so much even think that Eddie was per se, as much as Richie may have had those tendencies because he took it so hard. But with that being said, I didn't think that came across in the book. You know what I'm saying? So I think
no, Eddie in the book was like, I died for Bill, but I didn't think that came across as he was homosexual.
That's just true loyalty to your friend.
Well, and Bill was very charismatic. He was like their natural leader. They like kind of he joined them together in a way. I will say the reason I asked about Eddie is because Eddie's saying he's a virgin in the 1990. I'm not saying that made him gay, but he came off as kind of like mild-mannered, like almost like he was hiding something even deeper.
Yeah, but you would almost think that was possible for that because he was not married. Whereas,
that too, he was not married.
Eddie,
it came across.
It came across like in there, but that wasn't even an issue because Richie wasn't portrayed that way in the 1990 version.
No, I know.
Whereas he was in this other one.
I just wonder why. I mean,
I just think they just took liberties to change it.
Yeah, I was just curious. I
mean, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with it, but Stephen King's intention was not for them to be.
I did love how they were affected more by Eddie's death in the new part 2 versus like in part 1, like he slipped over his shoulder and like, that's it.
Right.
Like, I feel like they move on quite quickly, whereas I feel like they are affected.
And I just hated the fact that they left. They left Eddie in the sewer.
But they did that in the book too.
I just hated that because how ironic that the person who is a germaphobe and has all these things has to have his final resting place in crap.
I know.
It's just terrible. But I get it. I understand it, but I hated that. But that's also because Eddie's my favorite. Of course, Jessica Chastain, wonderful actress, plays Beverly Marsh. She was not as amorous towards everybody as Annette Schulz.
I think she did a really decent job.
I think she did a wonderful job. She was a stronger character as far as I think she really could have kicked Tom's ass. So I like that there was more fight in her because that's what I saw coming out. Because in the book, she realizes, you know what? This is it. I can't deal with this anymore. Andy Bean, I'm not familiar with him. He plays Stanley Uris. Of course, Bill Skarsgård plays Pennywise. Did you notice Stephen King was the shopkeeper?
I will say,
let's highlight
this. Bob Apple says, to me, King's cameo stood out. His acting performance much improved over the years. I agree. That was really natural.
I loved the part when he's like,
the ending sucked.
Well, let's start over. And so he asks him again, may I help you? Like, sort of like, oh God, who is this guy? Like,
I liked how he said the ending sucked because a lot of people criticize King's endings. It was like a wink.
I love that. And I also like the fact that he was asking, Bill's stuttering and he's like, this and he's like all the different things they were cutting to, bowling ball.
Yeah.
I just thought it was good.
It was very well done. I liked that.
I love when he makes his cameos just as much as I love when Stan Lee would make his cameos in the Marvel movies.
I do like that.
And that's because they're both likable guys. You know what I'm saying? Owen Teague plays Patrick Hockstetter. who also is an actor that was in The Cell and The Stand.
The CBS version?
I'm not sure. You would have to tell me that. I haven't seen. No, it couldn't be the original because he's a young guy.
No, yeah.
But
no, I know who you're talking about. I'm wondering if he was the character I hated. How they represented him.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that Patrick Hockstetter had more of a role in the newer version of the movie than he did overall, because you would have thought Belch would have been the one to do the things, because Belch is the one that picks him up in the car. But in this movie, it's Patrick, and Patrick was
in the book. He's terrible.
God, I hated him.
He's basically
so much.
Like a serial killer.
Yes.
Like he's got the traits of a serial killer.
I hated
he kills
him
animals
so much. I was so glad that he got murdered the way he did.
Me too. Yeah, that was very satisfying.
But it brings up the point. What is the deal with the refrigerators? I mean, you have refrigerators, like the head in the refrigerator, the leeches coming out of the refrigerator to get him. In the 2017 Pennywise, Stanley's head comes out with the spider out of the refrigerator. Is that to make refrigerators scary?
I think so.
Stay out of the refrigerator.
Anything could come out of a fridge, apparently. Not just food. It's heads, mostly heads.
Something could get you. Of course, in this case, the movie opens up with Georgie and Bill,
and it's the 80s.
Bill making the boat. He goes and gets his arm ripped off, very similar to how the book opens up. Of course, the 2019 version is, Adrian and his boyfriend on the bridge, and of course, they have.
But they never reference it again. They never reference like the evil and the I don't know. I didn't think they did a good job at connecting the hate crime that they showed in the movie, which is in the book. In the book, you can just spell it out like, here's an example of why Derry's not right. I just feel like it wasn't spelled out with that. Like, even Paul said, because Paul doesn't know the book. Right. So Paul was like, they never went back to that thing that happened with the bridge. So it's like, it's almost like he didn't get
because
that,
in the book, that there's trials and all the things that happen that lead up to it, whatever.
So he didn't really get that was a symbolic thing that, like, Derry is not right. Like Derry has some kind of like evil force at work here.
Derry is a breeding ground for evil,
hate, and like fear, and So anyway, so I feel like that wasn't exactly spelled out. Like, I'm glad that they included it because it was faithful to the book. But the things that they included that were faithful in this new version, especially in the 2019 version, I feel like were a little confusing. Like, they changed Chud completely. Like, I know you can't really show battling of the mind, but at the same time, they're like, oh, these Native Americans and this thing, and like the thing goes in this.
I think the reason they did that, instead of them having going into the little, it wasn't a tree house. What would you call it?
It was like a clubhouse. A den. Like they made it into a smokehouse.
Clubhouse den or whatever. I liked how it was well done in the book, where they went in there, and then that's when they saw what happened was through this actual ritual. They did the actual ritual. I don't know. They took liberties with coming up with a whole new storyline to have them do that. And this is one of my gripes about it, because I like the character of Mike, because Mike, to me, stayed in the town. He was kind of like the one that kept the light on, basically, to make sure if this ever was going to happen. He could have left. He didn't. Everybody went off and got. And
then there was this negativity placed on Mike that he lied.
Well, and I didn't like that.
I didn't like that
negative, that he had tricked them somehow and lied to him, and that they were lied to the group, and that he was not a good person, because Mike was really a good person.
He was.
And also, too, the other thing I did not like in the first movie, that they get in a fight and they break off and they go their separate ways, because that didn't happen in the 1990 version, and that didn't happen in the book either.
There was tension in the book with Eddie because of his mom, but that's different. He stood up to her, though. He didn't let. But I'm talking about
Richie. When Richie was like, "I'm not doing this. I'm not spending my summer doing this," and blah blah, and then he goes off, and then other people follow him, and then they don't speak to each other for a period of time or whatever. I didn't like how they didn't have that camaraderie like they did in the book, or in the 1990 version. So that's the only thing I did not like about that.
I agree. And I feel like they put it in there to lengthen the movie too. Because remember in part 2, they revisit how they were fighting and how they did their separate things. And it was just so, like, part 2 felt so long. Part 2 is almost as long as the entire miniseries.
Well, I just almost wonder too if the reason the kids acted that way was because of the time period.
I mean, I'm just saying, I think they added in unnecessary stuff, like that whole fight. I felt like it was in there to make it longer, the story, the movie longer, to have the kids in the part 2 longer, because part of their fight was represented in part 2 as well.
Well, I didn't like the fight, and I did not like how they treated Mike in that situation, because it was unwarranted. Almost like, like you're trying not to take responsibility for the promise that you said you were going to do. Why would Mike make this up?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Mike should have had like the keys of what this was, because really Bill was the one that came up with the ritual and knew what ritual that they were supposed to do. So I didn't like the way that was handled.
By the way, so speaking of the smokehouse, or the ritual in the clubhouse that they made into a smokehouse, the one of the original guys who worked on the 1990 version, he wrote what's called a Bible, which means it's like an outline
mm-hmm.
of the entire story from the manuscript to what they were going to try to do on TV with it. So he wrote the Bible, and he said the one thing he wished they could have included was the clubhouse smoke scene, because he said that it bridged the gap of what Pennywise was and the spider, and it bridged what really it was. And I feel like here too, you kind of got it with Bill's trippy incident, which Mike tricked them into,
right?
But you still didn't really get it,
right?
The way they experienced it, and they mutually decided to experience it of their own accord. They weren't tricked into experience. I think that's a very important difference too.
Well, and also too, they had that discrepancy where in the first one, Ben is our historian, whereas Mike was always the historian, okay, because he stayed there, which made sense. But then when you get to chapter 2, Mike is now your historian. Which it kind of makes sense that Ben would be a loner, new kid, spending his time in the library, looking up stuff about the town. I get that part of it. But it was the fact that, now Mike's into all of the historian part of it. I don't know. I just kind of felt like, yes, you did forget. But once you come back into Derry, you're supposed to have all these, memories flooding back to you. Why would they all of a sudden become jaded and think that Mike wouldn't have their best interest? I mean, clearly if Mike is calling them back, it's because they have a job to do. And they knew that when they left, basically at that point. I think, the first chapter, of course, focuses more on the kids. The second part focuses more on the adults with some flashbacks to the kids. That's my thoughts on that part of it. I did say there was more foul language. That was one of my notes. Al Marsh is more abusive. Eddie's mom, to me, was more of a creepy adult. I did not like her portrayal in the 2017, 2019. I did not, personally.
The actress's portrayal?
Yes, I didn't like.
You thought it was too overtly
I didn't
creepy?
I just didn't like it. I just thought it was.
I thought it was more closely aligned to how she is in the book and how she's so overprotective because, well, in the book, though, it's pretty clear that she's overprotective because he had a health scare, and so she's way overprotective, but it's almost like she's so obsessed with him because she has nothing else in her life, including a romantic partner. But in the book, it doesn't seem like she's interested in him in that way, but she's all over him in the movie. I do get what you're saying,
yeah, I don't know.
She is kind of like that in the book a little, but not to this level.
But also, too, I don't know if it's just that one scene where I think what turned me off about it was that one scene
where she gets asking her a kiss.
Yeah, and how that interaction between Richie and her was just, I don't know, just kind of gross.
Yeah.
Also, I put in there Patrick Hockstetter was more prominent, than in 1990, which I mentioned that before, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice. Also, too, I want to mention something about Patrick out of the book, This American Masters. I kind of refer to this, Kelsi gave me
some good resources. So yeah, this year.
She gives me all kinds of good resources. We are not reading Firestarter, and I have not read Firestarter.
I kind of wish we would have because of the new movie coming out.
I've seen the movie, but it was so long ago.
Well, you haven't seen the new movie.
Not the new movie, and I haven't read the book. It says here in Firestarter, one of the shop's clinical psychologists, psychotherapist is named Dr. Patrick Hockstetter.
Oh.
In King's 1986 novel It, we are told that a Derry resident named Patrick Hockstetter disappeared in 1958. Eddie Kaspbrak does dream that he sees Hockstetter's decomposing body, but it is only a dream, and by the novel's end, Hockstetter is still missing. Is it possible that these two Patrick Hockstetters are the same character? If this theory is correct, Patrick Hockstetter vanished from Derry in 1958 when he was approximately 11 years old and surfaced 20 or so years later as a shop doctor. And King used it to reveal Hockstetter's backstory, powerfully linking the two tales. Some readers believe the two characters' names are merely coincidental, or merely a coincidence. My thinking is that Patrick Hockstetter is a pretty specific name to coincidentally use twice. So is that not kind of...
So in Firestarter, he's a psychologist.
Like a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist who does like experiments.
So he's bad.
Yes.
So
remember like a serial killer who's like doing all these things. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I
don't know if it's a coincidence or not.
How could it be a coincidence? It's his character.
They never find the body. But what made me kind of think that was interesting is the fact that how he's portrayed in this movie here, he kind of takes more of a forefront. He's the one that picks Henry up. Yeah, he picks him up.
In the 1990s.
And again, I'm just wondering if it's because it's so many characters, they're picking and choosing who they want to, come on.
They didn't need as many bullies as in the
I
book.
personally think the bond with the children and the adults is stronger in the book and in the 1990 version of the film, more so than in this.
You think the kids are stronger in 1990 versus 2017 and 2019?
Yeah, and as they are in the book. Like, I think the 1990, the overall feeling you get about their friendship and loyalty to one another matches the book. The 1990 version matches the book more so than this version. What do you think?
I think the kids had a great chemistry. It's hard for me to criticize anything with the kids except for the dialogue being more vulgar. And I feel like they did it just to, I don't know, make it edgier, or I just felt like it felt unnatural. I don't know. I mean, I curse a lot, but I just felt like it felt unnatural. I thought their bond was mostly okay. I thought it was believable for the time period. I did think it was weird how they had them fight more. I thought the adults felt closer in the new version. 2017, 2019. I like the adults' bond. I didn't like, per se, the storyline of the adults, especially with that whole side carnival thing with Bill and... It took a lot of diversions that I did not like. And it felt like the Barrens was barely a thing in the new movies, and it felt like the sewer was barely a thing. It was more about the house on Neibolt Street, where it's supposed to be kind of like equally about the house, but also the sewers in the book.
Right.
So it feels like, I guess, the 1990 movie focuses more on the sewer. The new movie focuses more on the house.
Right.
So it's like both didn't kind of equally look at both areas, in my opinion. Anyway, I feel like there's things you could nitpick about both versions.
Yeah, I think you could.
But I like the kids the best from the 1990. I do like the kids pretty close to that level in the new movies. However, for both, I prefer the kids to the adults. In terms of chemistry, acting, everything. However, if I had to just compare the adults in terms of acting, I feel like I prefer the new adults in terms of chemistry on screen together. They didn't feel off. But having said that, I just don't like any of the story with the adults in the new version. I don't like how it was written. Like I said, the side story, the ridiculous cartooniness of Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård head being on the spider, and also when they're like, he's small, and then he's like shrinking and he looks like a shriveled up baby. I'm like, this is so weird. Like,
I don't know, what is that?
Like, was he supposed to be part of the Rock? Like, he's part of the foundation of Derry?
Yeah, somebody agrees with me about the mom.
Yeah, she's so gross. Yeah, I do think she was pretty weird. Yeah, she's kind of had some weird tones.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I liked the 2017, 2019. I thought they did they had things. I had favorite scenes. I thought the scare factors was a little more ramped up. The restaurant scene, was good also.
I mean, it had jump scares, but once you see it again, I feel like it becomes more cartoonish to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
especially Bill Skarsgård. Like, his performance to me, like so the first time I see him jump out of the projector, it's scary. The second time, it's still effective. But like when he does stuff like the dancing part where it's shaking, that part I'm talking about, where he's dancing, it's cartoonish. The part where he's like shrinking up into the thing, it's not scary. The part where his head's on a spider, it's not scary. I'm not saying the giant spider from 1990.
Stanley's head on the spider was creepy to me.
Oh, that was creepy. That was creepy. That was effective. I agree with that.
I even put that Stanley spider head. Awesome.
No, that was awesome. That was one of the CGI things that was well done. But whenever it came to Bill Skarsgård or Pennywise looking like I said, the leper, that's completely CGI,
right.
And I hated it. I thought you could just have a normal person play the leper and have great makeup.
Yeah.
They made it look like a cartoon. I wasn't scared of that leper at all. It was almost like a kind of like funny, like they even played that scene with Eddie getting barfed on like as humor. So to me, it walked a line where it was trying to be too cutesy, if that makes sense. Even like the leper scene is supposed to be terrifying, not cutesy.
Well, they did. I mean, I think there was more humor in it because think about the doors, the 3 doors.
Yes.
It was scary, and then they revisited it again, and then they had the little dog.
Like the dog was funny, but at the same time, it's like it takes away with
the seriousness of what's going on.
I mean, to me, like it takes away from it. Whereas when Tim Curry did the funny stuff, it was funny, but not really funny. Like like playing to the audience, like the movie audience. It was Tim Curry being an exaggerated version of a clown.
Right.
Like, playing laughs like a clown would. So to me, it fit with the character, whereas what they're doing in the movie is like a wink, wink, nod, nod to the movie audience.
Right.
And that's what turned me off a little bit. I don't know. What do you guys think? I know a lot of people love, especially part 1, the 2017 part 1. A lot of people love that movie. Gabby Reeds said she thinks it's like the ultimate like horror summer
Stanley
movie.
Spiderhead reminded me of the one in The Thing.
Me too. That's a perfect comparison.
Oh, yeah. I just thought it was gross, and I just thought it was terrible.
That's a great comment. Yeah, very well done.
I do also think the painting that that woman in the painting, to me, was creepy.
That was creepy.
And it's actually, that painting is based on real art. Real artists, not that particular painting, but that art style.
Yes, I've seen the style.
Andrew saw it and said, "Oh, that's based on Amedeo Modigliani." I'm like, I said, "Can you spell that for me?" And I still can't pronounce it. My son Andrew is an art history major, so
he would know.
So he would know. But anyway, he was just like that. That's where he comes in and says, "Oh yeah, that's not that exact painting, but it's that art style." And then he proceeded to show me some of the paintings like that.
I will say, Jamie did say she wished they would have shown the aftermath in the town, because they kind of showed the house on Neibolt crumbling, but I wish they would have, both movies would have.
Yeah, because actually that was very powerful, that the town is destroyed. It's almost like it had to be destroyed so that it could be rebuilt,
because Pennywise was such a part of the town
for so long,
infecting the town
since
and every being, like every fiber of the town. So I thought it was very symbolic and really important to the story. So when I got to that part in the book, I was like, I love this, because this is something I don't know about from either movie.
Well, and the other thing I want to say is I did like how Stanley did write the letters, and they got the letters at the end, and it kind of explained why.
Oh, I didn't like that.
You see, I did.
I
kind of felt like, he knew that he could not overcome his fear enough to help them, that he would have hindered them in being able to do whatever they needed to do.
I like it in the sense that it tied a bow on things, but it's not in the book.
I know.
It's not spelled out like that.
I know, but I liked it.
No, it was an interesting take. I could see why they did it. Also, what do you think about them remembering?
I kind of like that in a way.
You do? I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it.
Well, I mean, I say that I kind of loved that you got that little perspective, because I kind of felt like Stanley just seemed like he was just portrayed as such a wimp, and I just think to myself, somebody could be so scared that they just can't handle the fear. It's like depression, really. Somebody can't handle that to the point that no matter how much people love you or whatever, you just can't do it. So I kind of liked that he could explain himself in a way. Yeah. I know it wasn't in the book, but
I get what you mean.
I kind of liked it because I always kind of felt bad for Stanley in a way. You know, we never really knew. Like, he just basically checks out.
I mean, the closest they got to explaining it in the 1990 version is, I think Eddie in the library says, you know, he came the closest to it, to really what was behind it. I guess he couldn't stand facing it again. So in a way, to me, that explained it a little bit. But I do get what you're saying, how Stanley was able to explain himself. But it just seemed like, you know, when he went out to take the bath, that he didn't have time to go write letters, and you know what I mean?
Right.
But I do like how they remember each other, because you know what I was thinking after reading the book and the 1990 version? I was like, okay, so Ben and Bev get together.
Yeah,
and yet they don't know each other. They're like, who are you again? How do we meet again?
I thought about that too.
Yeah,
I was like, are they going to forget because or are they only going to remember because they leave together?
Yeah.
You know, it just seemed kind of weird.
So they don't remember how they met or anything before a certain point. They just remember that they're together.
Right.
So to me, like, I did kind of like that they remembered, because it makes sense if they wind up together. They have to have some kind of shared history.
I just thought it was kind of sad that they wouldn't remember. And also in the book, I thought it was kind of sad that they were forgetting. Like, even Mike was forgetting and things were fading on the page. Like, he wouldn't even be able to remember it, you know, for the future. And how sad that they shared something so crazy, and they could have died. And if it wasn't for them being together, you know, coming together, that I can see how they couldn't remember, and that's what kept them apart for the 27 years. But once they came back and they killed it, why couldn't they remember? I just wanted them to remember. I wanted them to stay friends.
I wanted them to stay friends too, especially because it was such a powerful, wonderful bond, very special. But you know, part of King's reasoning behind writing this is, yes, it was the bridge thing with the Billy Gruff, but also he took inspiration from there's interviews, and they showed this in the documentary about the 1990 version, where he talks about childhood, and as you become an adult, childhood almost completely fades. He says, how crazy is it that you almost forget, you remember the really good things and you remember sometimes the really bad things, but a lot of like the in-between is just gone, faded from memory. So I think it's another symbol and metaphor for childhood as a whole. So you could have these strong bonds, but as we get older, no matter how strong those bonds were and how special they were, like your whole childhood, it's magical. It can't last. It fades. It's inevitable.
Right.
I feel like it's part of the message of the book. You
that's
can't
me,
ever
That's
recapture
just me
that.
wanting to have that happy ending.
No, me too. No, me too. I like that they remembered in the new version. I did, because I was like, well, it makes sense for Bev and Ben, but also,
and I kind of like the fact that Mike could leave. Like, he no longer had to be tied there. But believe it or not, he's in Insomnia as a librarian.
Oh yeah.
You know, and which takes place in Derry, because Ralph Roberts talks to him.
Yeah. I haven't read that one yet, but
that's another chunker.
Yeah, I will get to it eventually, I'm sure. But
it's just, I don't know.
I'm with you that I wish that, but I understand King's reasoning behind them forgetting. It's basically, I think, part of his message about childhood and how you can't take anything really truly with you from that time. Nothing stays exactly the same.
See, even Jamie says the memory fading was sad to her too. So
it was sad to me as well. Trust me, guys. I found a really cool. I want to show this before we end, like in a little while. I want to make sure I don't forget to show it. I found this cool edition of it. So I don't have original edition. This isn't even the original edition, obviously. But so this is the crappy edition that I was okay with putting tabs in. So I'm in Philly. I go to 5 bookstores looking for vintage horror. It's horrendous, like no good horror section.
Right.
Like one was just all King, one was all Kuntz, and one it was mixed up with mystery and sci-fi. And I looked through and I could only find like very few things, but I found this and I was like, hell yeah, it's worth it, because even though it's not a first printing, I love that it's the Tim Curry movie adaptation, and the spine is pretty damn, it's not creased.
That's awesome.
So I just wanted to display it. It's not perfect condition, like I said, it's not even a first printing, but for $3.95 I said, hell yeah,
why not?
Hell yeah.
One last thing I want to say about Bill Skarsgård's portrayal. You know, he was separated from the cast and crew during that first movie a lot.
So they could stay scared of him?
So they would be surprised when they would see him, which I thought was, you know, pretty clever. So he could have a maximum impact on them.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, his role actually gave him nightmares.
Oh, really?
Yes. And the third thing is Hugo Weaving from The Lord of the Rings, who plays the elf King. He was also in The Matrix as one of was it Mr. Smith? I think.
Aaron? I forgot I know the Elf King. I'm trying to remember which Elf King character.
He was considered for Pennywise.
Really?
And the reason, yes, it was him and Bill, and they were like neck and neck. And the reason they chose Bill was because Bill was more childlike in his interpretation of it. They also were considering Tilda Swinton, who plays in Doctor Strange.
Wow.
She's a really great actress as well.
So a woman, because we didn't even talk about this in the book.
Well,
it is female.
It doesn't matter if it would have been male or female,
No, it shouldn't matter, but...
No. I'm just saying, so that's why she was considered.
No, but I'm saying in the book, we didn't even discuss how they made a big deal about how it is female.
Right.
And it was pregnant. And they don't talk about any of that in either movie.
No.
But I think that's very fascinating that's in there. Also, we can't sign off without talking about the controversial thing in the book. So let's quickly talk on this. A lot of people are turned off by this. I want to know why you're okay with it. I'm not. Honestly, so I'm talking about the sex scene.
Oh.
I am not. I don't like it, but So I've heard about the scene. I knew it was there before I read the book. I knew about it.
Yeah, you reminded me because I totally forgot about it.
I read an article about it. And actually, Grady Hendrix he revisited all of King's works, and he did this great series of blog posts on, I think it was Tor Nightfire blog. Anyway, the way Grady Hendrix interprets it about how Bev actually, if you take their age away, it's Bev taking control of her own sexuality, Bev binding them together. It's really Bev who instigates it. So it's not as... When I read the initial article, which described, like, why is this in it? It's so weird. I had my own perceptions of how it would be. And when I got there, it was actually more subdued than I thought. And I thought it was actually quite not as gross as I thought in terms of the way they wrote Bev's experience. It was about birds taking flight, and it wasn't as physical. Like, yes, the idea of it's gross because we're thinking of their age and because we're thinking of them all. But if you take away and you just think of the symbolism, it didn't bother me that much.
Symbolism and what it was supposed to stand for. Now, Stephen King did make a comment about it because I had forgotten about it. Obviously, it didn't make that big of an impression.
It does for a lot of people,
many years ago when I had read it. I'm reading it now and I'm like, oh, so this is what they're talking about or whatever. I mean, clearly... I
thought it was going to be worse, to be honest.
It's not appropriate, obviously.
No,
However, Stephen King made a comment about it, that it's supposed to show unity because they were lost in the sewer system, and it kind of like Bev kind of unites them. It's also the going from childhood to adulthood.
It's their transition into, and especially because Pennywise preys on the young more, it's their way of, like, they're going to this next level.
Right.
They defeated him one way, and now they're going to go into where they're going to be an adult, where they're even less
And he
susceptible.
even makes the comment that it was written in that time. He had whatever his intentions were for it. It would not be something that could have been written today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have to take that in consideration.
I want to read you. Keep going. I'm still listening, but I want to find the thing that Grady Hendrix said, because the way he worded it, like... Right after I finished it, I went and read Grady Hendrix's thing, and it
look at Harley.
I mean, I'm not saying I agree with the idea of
wow.
it. Oh gosh, she's upset about us talking about this.
No, she's not. The fact that she knows marriages that haven't lasted this long.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for watching so long.
Thank
We're
you.
going on very long.
We're about to wrap up.
We are. We've done these long chats before, but when you think about us talking about 2 movies and a chunker of a 1,300-page book, I think we're actually being concise.
Actually 3 movies if you think about it.
Oh yeah, because the 2-part. All right, here it is.
Yeah, it didn't bother me in the sense that after you telling me about it, I was thinking, oh no, what did I miss? Why do I not remember this or whatever? I don't condone it, but at the same time, I can understand what he was trying to do in it, I guess.
So here's Good taste and Stephen King have never really been on speaking terms, and you get the impression that he agrees with John Waters that good taste is the enemy of art. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the book's pivotal sex scene. I can't think of a single scene King has written that has generated as much controversy as the scene where the kids in 1958, aged between 11 and 12 years old, have defeated, for the moment, it, but are stumbling around lost in the sewers, unable to find the exit. As a magical ritual, Beverly has sex with each of the boys in turn. She has an orgasm, and afterwards they are able to ground themselves and find their way out of the sewers. Readers have done everything from call King a pedophile to claim it's sexist, a lapse of good taste, or an unforgivable breach of trust. But in a sense, it's the heart of the book. It draws a hard border between childhood, he's saying it as in the title of the book.
Right.
The whole book draws a hard border between childhood and adulthood, and the people on either side of that fence may as well be two separate species. The passage of that border is usually sex, and losing your virginity is the stamp in your passport that lets you know that you are no longer a child. Sexual maturity in most cultures occurs around 12 or 13 years old. Beverly is the one in the book who helps her friends go from being magical, simple children to complicated real adults. If there's any doubt that this is the heart of the book, then check out the title. After all, it is what we call sex before we have it. Did you do it? Did he want to do it? Are they doing it? Like, we call sex it. Each of the kids in the book doesn't have to overcome their weakness. Each kid has to learn that their weakness is actually their power. Richie's voices get him in trouble, but they become a potent weapon that allow him to battle it when Bill falters. Bill's stutter marks him as an outsider, but the exercises he does for the stutters becomes a weapon that weakens it. So does Eddie Kaspbrak's asthma inhaler. More than once, Ben uses his weight to get away from the gang of gracers. And Mike is a coward and a homebody, but he becomes the guardian of Derry, the watchman who stays behind and raises the alarm when the time comes. And Beverly has to have sex, and good sex, the kind that heals, reaffirms, draws people closer together, and produces orgasms, because her weakness is that, quote, she's a woman. He's not saying that being a woman is a weakness. He's saying that that's what people are preying upon in
Well, and it's also, and not only that, that's the father was so worried about it.
Yes, it says throughout the book, Beverly's abusive father berates her, bullies her, beats her, but he never tries to sexually abuse her until he's possessed by it. Remember that it becomes what you fear, and while it becomes a mummy, a wolfman, the creature from the Black Lagoon for the boys, for Beverly, it takes the form of a gout of blood that spurts out of the bathroom drain, the threat of her father raping her. Both of those things. Throughout the book, Beverly is not only self-conscious about her changing body, but also unhappy about puberty in general. She wants to fit in with the losers club, but she's constantly reminded of the fact that she's not just one of the boys. From the way the boys look at her to their various complicated crushes, she's constantly reminded that she's a girl becoming a woman. Every time her gender is mentioned, she shuts down, feeling isolated and withdraws. So the fact that having sex, the act of doing it, her moment of confronting the heart of this thing that makes her feel so removed, so isolated, so sad, turns out to be a comforting, beautiful act that bonds her with her friends rather than separates them forever, is King's way of showing us that what we fear most, losing our childhood, turns out to be not so bad after all.
Overthinking, says Bev, is the glue. You got this. I mean, I am glad that they did not put it in either of the movies.
Oh, it couldn't have been done in the movies.
I'm just glad that it wasn't even there. But like I said, I mean, it was part of the book. I understand it. The symbolism that Bev is the one that experiences the blood. It's all about her womanhood.
Bev is the one who
chooses
to
do that.
She's the one who comes up with the idea. They're like, what? Like, Eddie's just like, I don't think I could do this. But it becomes, so the age is what makes it creepy.
Yes.
It is the age, and I understand that, and I know, I totally respect.
I almost think if it would have been set like the age of the kids in the 2017 movie, junior high, it would have been a little bit different.
14, 15, 16, 16.
Than it is because they're 11 and 12.
Yes.
Situation. I understand that.
But I get the symbolism of it, but I understand why people are turned off of it, and I respect if people don't like it. That's totally okay. We could all have differences of opinion and express that in a very respectful way, and I just, like, personally was expecting it to be something else. From hearing about it, it was so notorious to me, having read articles about it before even reading the book. So to me, I went in, and when I read that scene, I was like, wow, it was actually more spiritual, and it's from Bev's perspective, not the boys. And so to me, that's also important. Now I do understand people think it's creepy that an older man is writing about a girl losing her virginity.
Yeah, I've even had that. I've heard that criticism.
I understand that.
Even with Carrie.
Yes.
You know, because there's a lot of blood and all that is
about
happening at that
menstrual
time too.
cycles.
But you know,
to me, it's more about the symbolism, not like really kids doing it.
And I don't think he's getting off on that. You know,
no, I don't think he's getting off on it either. He's like a very liberal person. Is the funny thing, like his
and
actual
he's very,
beliefs.
very for women.
Yes, no, he's very much. And like he wrote a whole story about Big Driver, about like a rape victim, and like it's very powerful.
Yes.
It's a very like pro woman story. It really is. So I don't think he's like a sexist. I really don't. I do understand why it turns people off, but for me, I was expecting something different, and I'm not saying that like it had to be in the book.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I understand.
it is an uncomfortable scene, but like I said, when I read it many, many years ago, I obviously didn't remember it to this point. So it didn't make an impression on me like, ooh, like I'm not going to, you know, like the book because of that one particular scene. I've read so many books in my lifetime that have scenes in it that are awful. You know what I'm saying? But that's part of life also too, you know.
But to me there was like a love behind that, and it was like a symbolism.
I don't think there was nothing really anything dirty about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
it wasn't like they squeezed her boobs or perky, like, because like other authors, when you read their sex scenes in the 80s and 90s in old school horror, it's explicit. I was expecting something explicit because I heard how controversial it was, and it didn't feel explicit. It did feel like it was symbolic, but I do still understand no matter what, somebody being offended.
And it does seem like most of the people in our chat today, you know, the scene makes them uncomfortable or they don't care for the scene per se, but they're not like, oh no, I dislike this book or
because of the scene.
Yes,
no, I think most people are like, I like the book, but I wish that scene wasn't in there. And I understand that, but I actually am just as bothered by the scene of Bill just cheating on his wife with Beverly after however many years, and him being like, oh yeah, I married my wife because she looks like Bev. And also then all of a sudden there's amnesia and he can conveniently forget that he cheated on his wife.
Right.
To me, that part, like, I hate how King always has to throw because he's done this consistently in these books we've been reading this year, and I hate how he throws cheating on a spouse. The one character you're supposed to be like, he's a great stand-up character, like Bill. Like, I really thought Bev...
Maybe he thinks it's horrific.
Anyway, I didn't like that part. So to me, like, that was really off-putting. Like, that Bill would go and cheat on his wife when I thought he really loved and cared about his wife, and he's supposed to be so worried about her. I'm not saying he wouldn't be because he cheated on her, like that he wouldn't care that she got kidnapped or taken by it. But I'm saying it lessened that part for me, where he's supposed to be so concerned about her, like, you didn't care about her like last night, bitch. Right. When you're literally in bed with someone else. But anyway, that part took away from it for me, and it was way more explicit than whatever happened with the kids. I still understand being grossed out by that part, but to me specifically, it didn't bother me because I saw what it was saying.
Please, anybody listening to this, do not think Kelsi and I promote that.
Oh no. I think it's weird that it's.
I mean, we're only discussing it because it is a controversial scene.
Of course,
from the book.
I feel like we couldn't have this conversation without
at least mentioning.
Of course, and I just want to say, closing, like, I understand not being okay with it, but I understand where King was coming from. Kind of, I do think you could have done the book without it. That scene. However, I understand, I guess, what he was going.
Well,
for.
Richard Brown made a comment about how King didn't remember writing Cujo. And
probably because of drugs.
Well, because of
cocaine.
Drugs and alcohol. And the thing is there is a period of time, and it's a part of that period of time, I believe, where it was almost a decade where he was into drugs and alcohol. So there's a lot of things that King puts in his books that, you know, he's not going to remember, you know, the basis of what he was writing about, or your mind is not the same.
I really think he wasn't thinking, oh yeah, let's have 11 and 12-year-olds.
But he made that comment that, you know, he tried to explain what his thinking was behind it.
Yes.
That it was not something that would be able to fly today.
Of course not. Yeah.
So, not that it would have flown back then either.
No, but it was really just a symbolism from going from childhood to adulthood, and that is the thing that takes most people from that to that. So that I get the idea. I understand, though, that people wish it wasn't in there. I do understand all sides, honestly. Candy Corn Apocalypse says, yeah, it seems strange even when I first read it as a young adult. Again, it is a little strange, but I get the idea, the symbolism or whatever. But I still think it's a great book, despite the controversy.
5 stars for me.
4.5, almost perfect.
In my top 10.
It's definitely in my top 10. But again, the funny thing is, like, you know, The Stand has a lot of character development, too, and a lot of just, like kind of slow paced stuff happening, but for some reason I never felt like The Stand was work. Whereas one part, I think it was around the 700-page mark, where Mike goes back into talking more about the history, and I'm like, no.
Okay, let me ask you this before we wrap up. Did you tear up at any time?
At the very end.
At the end of the book.
The last sentence is about childhood.
Well, I teared up when he was going through the town, thinking about, you know, there was like a period of time in the town where he's like reminiscing and thinking about that. I teared up in that. I did not tear up in the 1990 book, but I did tear up
the movie, you mean?
In the 2019 movie when they're all on their bikes at that one little end.
And it's like the music and they're like, you know, looking at each other.
So I did.
It's representative
but I
of
also
childhood,
think what it is to me is that the story ended. You know what I'm saying? Like the story ended.
Yeah.
And I think it was such a great story and powerful that you're not going to really revisit these characters again in this way.
I thought it was one of King's better endings in terms of the town destroyed and then Bill saying the stuff about childhood. I liked that ending. I really did. I thought it was a good ending in terms of you got something with the town happening, like a big finale with all the deaths, and that was crazy. I will say, what form of Pennywise do I most like? Definitely Tim Curry. You never answered.
I think it's Tim Curry.
I can't believe you even have to think about it. I can't even believe
there's aspects of Bill Skarsgård that is really creepy to me, scenes in it that are really creepy to me, but I do think I just like Tim Curry. His overall,
his voice
consistently,
and his facial expressions, like, I don't know, it's, to me, it's Tim Curry always.
It's just different.
It is very different. I will say, I'm not bashing Bill Skarsgård. I think he did a good.
I think he did a great job. But if I had to choose between the two, I would pick Tim.
And
Curry.
I would say I wish there was less CGI with Bill Skarsgård. Mm-hmm. I think it would have been more effective if he got to shine more.
I think Bill Skarsgård looks more horrific
at times. Yes.
Whereas Tim Curry is more of what you would think kids would think of as a clown. Like, I would approach Tim Curry's clown before I would approach Bill Skarsgård's clown. Like the little girl in the bleachers, I would not have even talked to him.
Yeah, but she did.
Tim Curry, I might have talked to him. Well, first of all, I wouldn't be under the bleachers.
I don't think I would talk to either of them. I'd be like, get away from me, weirdos, in the random places.
Seemed really friendly and bubbly, and
I thought he was creepy when he was in the sewer. He got the bloodshot eyes. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I don't think I would talk to either of them. But I wouldn't be in a horror movie because then there'd be no movie.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like we always say.
Yeah.
This has been so fun breaking down it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope we didn't miss too many comments. I think we basically highlighted a lot of people's. Thank you so much to everyone who watched live. Thank you if you happen to watch this long ass chat after the fact.
We really appreciate you sticking with us because, like I told Kelsi, we probably could have done a part 1 and a part 2.
I mean, we've had 2.5-hour chats before. I'm actually surprised it's only 2.5 hours because this is one of King's more massive works to try to dissect, and that we're dissecting so many adaptations too to go along with the book. It's like a big thing to talk about. I think it's a lot to go into, but I really had a blast. I loved getting to share my opinions with you guys. Thank you guys who shouted out your opinions in the comments. And if you're watching after the fact, please answer any of the questions that we addressed. Which Pennywise you like better? You know, what are your favorite scenes? Who's your favorite loser? I want to find out all of that. I love opinions.
Please. We do. I mean, we really do appreciate you hanging out with us. It's been fun for us, and it's fun getting to know what you guys like and your opinions. So,
and just a really quick reminder about what's coming up next for the Year of King project that we're doing. So we are going to be reading Cujo for this month in August. We will be having a chat on the last Sunday of August discussing Cujo, and of course the adaptation of Cujo starring Dee Wallace, who I love. I love Dee Wallace. It's not my favorite King adaptation, I will say, but I love her in general. I am excited because I've never read Cujo.
I have never read Cujo either,
but
and
I've
I think
seen the movie.
it's going to be tough.
Now, we know that there's references to the Dead Zone before people start telling us. We are reading the Dead Zone after Cujo. Maybe we should have reversed it. I don't think it's spoilers per se. I just think it's references. And
we actually picked them at the time we did because Cujo was more summertime,
yes.
and Dead Zone was more wintry. And so it's just how we had kind of planned everything.
If you guys are really worried, you could always wait on Cujo and read Dead Zone when we get to it in November. But before we even get to Dead Zone, after August, after Cujo, we're reading not Needful Things. We're reading 3 short stories in September, and then in October, we're reading The Beast, who also people are saying they can't wait for Needful Things. Needful Things is going to be our October read, but we're not going to do our chat until the next month.
Right. And keep in mind, guys, for September, we only have some short stories that we're doing. They're very short. And the reason we did that was so we could get a jump on Needful Things and start reading it.
In September. For preparation. But even so, we're not even going to be talking about Needful Things until November.
Yes.
So if you guys are worried, we're talking about it like the first Sunday in November.
We're kind of doing the same thing that we did with it.
Right. So we give each of you guys a little bit more time. It gives us a little bit more time. So yes, if you guys are looking forward to Needful Things, you should be able to, you could start it in September if you even really were worried about it. Because September, we're just doing short stories, 3 of them.
And you'll have a week in November.
Yep, and a week in November, which I'm going to maybe use. We don't know yet. We'll see. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to all of that. Stay tuned because we got more King dissection to come in a good way. Sounds like we're going to slice up King. But no, not the actual person dissection. The works.
The works.
Yes, the works. Thank you guys so much for hanging with us. But for this time, that's it for us. Till next time, Kat, what can we do?
Keep on killing it.
Keep on killing it. Just don't kill King by dissecting.
Right.
We're dissecting his works, not at him. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Happy Sunday.